is the DAWbench Radio Show, the official podcast of DAWbench.com.
Welcome to the DAWbench Radio Show. I am your host, Curigliano of AAVIM Technology in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Pete Brown of Microsoft in Maryland in the United States. How you doing today, Pete?
Good, Vin. Good. How about you?
I'm all right, considering
it's like ass o'clock in the morning for you right now.
It is ass o'clock, you know, the daylight saving kind of kicked in, so, you know, it's...
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's the old... 4:45, but it's, you know, it's a little bit later than that. But yeah, and then you guys, I think it kicks out, and then it kind of shifts the whole kind of synchronization stuff out again. But you know, it's all right.
Yeah.
How long we've been doing this, Pete?
I don't know. I think we should just talk about daylight savings time for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, that'd be riveting. That'd be riveting. Now, we have a very special guest today, and that is Paul Walker, aka BaconPaul, who is the maintainer and one of the largest contributors on the Surge Synthesizer Team, as well as being a contributor to several other open source audio projects, including the CLUP plugin standard. Welcome, Paul.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, you're most welcome, mate. You're most welcome. Now, we had a great chat pre-show, doing our tech check.
Yeah.
And look, one thing that I always start the shows with is, where I actually intersected with the Surge. Well, we're primarily talking about the Surge XT synthesizer project, but there is others involved with the project, which we can cover in the show. And, it's one of these synthesizers that was probably just sitting under my radar, and it was a commercial product for a very, very long time. Yep. And probably towards the end of last year, I got back into what I call my synth mode, and I was researching freeware instruments for my DAWbench project, which requires, well-coded freeware, so that I can actually share this with the wider community. And I stumbled on Surge XT, and I really wasn't expecting that much, to be honest. And
Thanks.
No, but I mean, we talk freeware synthesizers. I've been going through dozens of them, and some of them were good, some of them were good. But okay, I'll put it this way. I wasn't going in with any great expectation, put it that way, right?
Yeah, I get it.
And I landed on this thing, and then I just spent days and, just days and days in it, and I just loved it. I went, hang on. How is this freeware? So I dug a little bit deeper, and only recently then I discovered that it was originally developed by Claes Johanson, who is now the lead developer and founder at Bitwig. And I went, wow, how did I miss this? Because we had Claes on the show, and I'm pretty sure it didn't even get mentioned, and it came up again. Talking to Roger in a couple of shows ago, and I went, you know what, Pete? Why don't we get Paul on? Because you'd reached out to Pete after one, I think the Roger show that you listened to.
I sent him a thank you.
Yeah, and I just said, you know what? Let's get him on. And so here you are.
Yeah, and here I am. And look, I think that it's interesting the history of the thing and the way it started. That moment of generosity in 2018, when Claes realized that he was never going to ship another commercial version of Surge.
Yeah.
Because he was writing Bitwig, which is an amazing and beautiful and wonderful piece of software, but much more than a full-time job. And instead of just letting the thing wither, took the let's open source it with a little bit of the if we dump it on GitHub, it'll work philosophy. And that almost never works.
Yeah.
But it was lucky to coincide with a time where, I had some free time. I was, changing the amount of time I spent on my non-audio activities.
Yep.
Became sort of semi-retired.
Yep.
And so I got sucked into it. In fact, the reason I got sucked into it was CDM, the blog had an article about it being open sourced, and I just got a Rolly C-board. And so I thought, let's see if I can build that synth, and it didn't build. And so I kind of did nothing with it for 8 weeks, and it was Thanksgiving, and I tried to build it. And did A, then B, then C, then D, and I was kind of learning what I was doing. I mean, I've been writing software since I was, I think I got paid for my first piece of software in the 80s somewhere.
Right. So you've been coding.
I've been coding. I've been coding longer than I've been doing many other adult things.
Right. Okay. But you've also been involved with music as well.
Oh yeah. I've been playing instruments my whole life. Right? I've been a musician my whole life.
Yeah.
And so I just picked it up and started, fixing stuff, and then got made a maintainer as a gift for my goodwill, I guess, which was fun. And so we actually were able to kind of get that original unfinished 2018 version finished. Right when he open sourced it, it was between a prior release and a new release, and there were lots of unfinished features and lots of things didn't work, and so. We kind of formed this group in 2018 and 2019 of people who wanted it to work and had a really good dynamic of some people were testers and some people were wrangling forums and some people were writing code and some people were porting to different platforms. And, a whole bunch of experience like that kind of came together. And we realized that was a pretty neat group project. So sort of kept on with it.
Yep.
To get to Surge 1.6, which now we're at, XT 1.3. We're looking at XT 1.4 now. We're like, we're 8 versions beyond that now.
Right.
And so if you take a look at that synth, it's sort of, massively under-featured compared to what we have today. But, that initial act of generosity and that moment of insight of perhaps if I gave this away instead of protecting it as a melting ice cube that no one will ever see again.
Yeah.
I think that's really the other piece of generosity of, and accept contributions from people outside the project.
Right.
Those two moments of those two gifts to the music community, I think, really allowed us to have an anchor for how we built the team and projects that came after that.
Yeah. So that was 2018 that he offered it to the open source community.
Yeah. So September 2018, he put it on GitHub, and there was an article on CDM that said, "Hey, here's a free synth." And so I downloaded it and I pressed build, and it didn't build. And because it was missing like 3/4 of the files it needed to build on a Mac. And then, like I said, I got the Rolly C board and I was playing with that. And one of the features in Surge that was advertised as part of its free feature set was MPE. Turns out that was a little bit of a lie. The beginning of MPE was there, but by the time we got it put back together, all of MPE was there. And so, we just started chipping away, including a bunch of people who had loved the synth when it was a commercial product, showing up with, here's how it used to work. Or there was, one user who in 2019 came up and said, "Oh yeah, there was this bug and I blew up a pair of speakers in a nightclub in, somewhere in Germany with it once. Can you fix that?" Right.
Awesome.
Or, did you know if you hold the FM3 oscillator on a note for 5.5 minutes, you start getting a high harmonic appearing, right?
That's a whole genre of music in itself. So
right, exactly. I'm like,
that's just a common thing that you do, Yeah.
Well, so it's super ambient, I guess. But the harmonics became noticeable on a scope earlier than that. Of course, that was a not wrapping phase, so you got float rounding on the phase, and you only get 7. All that Pete knows the problem. I'm sure immediately when I said that, but so like fixing things like that was really fun. But that was driven by. Look, I'd never used Surge, right? Driven by a community that was testing it and helping us develop it. Like someone else wrote a manual, and we have like pretty good manual. All those kind of things came together through a community effort, which is why we make an effort to call it the Surge Synth Team, right? We've I think 55 unique Git contributors to the platform, and then design contributions from another 20 or people or so at this point. I think there's 75 people who can legitimately say they've had some impact on some part of the product we have today.
So is it your job to wrangle the cats, so to speak?
I mean, I don't have a job. I'm just one of the guys, right? One of the people, sorry.
Yep.
Look, there's some things that I've learned from having run software products outside the audio space. And we joke occasionally that, I use like an invisible hand to say, hey, maybe it would be nice if we, did X or did Y or did Z, right? If, GitHub commits had a reasonable message, if we had CI up and running, all those kind of things, that are really aimed at something I've worked on for my whole career, which is how do you make it easy for developers to develop, right? And for people to contribute. So a lot of that sort of infrastructural background is things that I've spent some of my time on. And, if we have a new developer show up, we review their code carefully, of course. But if someone's been around for a year and is contributing and they're required, we just, give them merge rights. And, we all have notifications set up on Discord for someone, like all that sort of mechanics stuff is there to make it so we can work it as a multi-contributor open contribution project. We use GitHub extensely. In fact, Pete, I should thank Microsoft. I think, whether they know it or not, one of the biggest contributors to the project is Microsoft. I think we've used, a couple of $1 million of build time on your compute servers with GitHub Actions without a bill appearing. Actually, I don't know if it's that much, but I was doing the math. If we'd have been running this project in 2012 or 2013 to pay for the amount of build time that we've used, it would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now it's just free as part of GitHub, right? We get an issue tracker that works and is free and collaborative and works around the world. We get software management. We get something that runs our tests on every commit. We've bothered to use all those tools, but those tools are all just sitting there so we can make it work. So I wouldn't say it's my job to wrangle everyone, but, I certainly worked hard with some of the other folks to put an infrastructure in place so we could actually change the software.
Yeah.
And once you can change the software, you get enthusiasts showing up and then it changes.
Yeah. But there still has to be someone or a group of people that make a decision of what actually gets merged in and what doesn't.
Yeah, right. And so look, you've used the synth, right? I think it would be polite to call it maximalist in its design principles, right? And we have a group of, 5 or 10 people who form consensus on, is a new feature a good idea or not? And that's worked pretty well. Usually it's a yes and as opposed to a no when someone proposes a feature, right? Yeah. As opposed to, no, we shouldn't have X. Yes, we should have X, but a constraint to make that coherent as Y is kind of more the conversation we have. So it's more that sort of thing. And occasionally, someone has an idea that we kind of politely don't necessarily make something that gets implemented, right? But more often than not, people show up with good ideas who are enthusiastic about the product and want to contribute, right? Like all the microtuning stuff we added, I didn't know anything about microtuning. Other than it existed and the way we tune a piano is somehow wrong in some sense, right?
Yeah.
The
internet just blew up. What?
Exactly. If you have opinions on how to tune a piano, please mail paul@devnull.com.
Here comes all the 432 hertz people are
right. So the just intonation people are very active in Surge, but it looks. I thought it was interesting. I'd never done anything with it, and so working with people who had actually composed music in that, and how does it work, and answering some of the hard questions, and then doing that, and then thinking about how do we want this to be a piece of software that other people can use, and then getting plugged into the community, and so then all of a sudden, one of the pieces of software we wrote in Surge, which is the library that converts Scala and KBM files to tuning tables, we open sourced separately with a liberal license, and now that's running in 8 other synths. And then the first synth to use MT-ESP, which is this really cool inter-plugin tuning standard. The launch day, we were the only free synth that was implementing that. All those kind of things end up happening if you yes and your way through a feature set, right? And so that's kind of been the philosophy I think we've been taking as much as we can. Look, sometimes people have really terrible ideas, including me. Thank God the team said to notice some of the things I wanted to put in the synth. It would have been a nightmare. But most of them have worked out pretty well.
Yeah. So Pete, have you got any questions for Paul the programming side of stuff?
Well, so Paul, you joined when, so Claes had already decided things like license and stuff like that, right?
That's correct. And look, he chose GPL3. And I think with the way VST3 was licensed at the time, that was a reasonable choice because GPL3 is a contagious license and he was using that. You can make a case that he could have been MIT for the non-VST3 parts, but we'll leave I'm not going to talk about licenses in that degree of detail on this podcast. But so he'd chosen a license. But, we did do things. He released it on his GitHub. We moved it to a team GitHub as part of the project. we before there were GitHub Actions, there were Azure pipelines. He set up an empty one, and then we had one of the team members set up one that actually worked. Things like licensing and distribution. An automated build of every commit that anyone can download is a super important part of the project.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I think there were 10 builds of Surge today because I was fixing a whole bunch of bugs this morning. Right. And so each one is a build you can download separately. Right.
Nice.
Things like that turn out to be super important.
So I realize though, and Vin, maybe we should have done this one a little bit earlier, but for folks that are listening to the podcast that have no idea what the heck Surge is.
Oh yeah.
We went right into freaking GitHub Actions and automated testing and CI.
Sorry, let me plug the product a little, right? You can the marketing budget match is free, I guess. So Surge is a hybrid synthesizer. It's a synthesizer that's delivered as a clap audio unit, a VST3, an LV2 on Linux, and a standalone application that you put into your digital audio workstation, like any other plugin. It has a couple of features I think make it pretty neat. It has a really unique modulation system, or a complete modulation system, I should say. More and more synths are having a similar modulation system where you can go from a large number of modulators to almost any point on the plugin. It has a robust set of effects, oscillators, a great set of filter models. It's low CPU and coded carefully to be performant, and generally sounds pretty good.
Sounds pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. We have lots of features. A lot of those features have come from absorbing work done in other open source projects. One of our oscillators is the mutable instruments plates operator, which we renamed Twist, right? So that's available polyphonically as a source. A lot of our filter models came from open source research or publicly disclosed models about how to do nonlinear filters that are kind of interesting. And so they can sound really good.
So you have a bunch of different oscillator models, or this is not your typical wavetable synthesizer. There's a lot more of other stuff going on.
Right. So we have sort of two virtual analog models, right, which are waveform generators. We've got two different wavetable models. We have a sort of expanded carpless strung model. We have a sample and hold oscillator, which is kind of like a quantized noise model. A tuned noise, if you want. We have mutable instruments Twist, and we have an oscillator called Alias, which we joke took 30 years of research on how to avoid aliasing and didn't do that. But sort of didn't do it purposefully in a super musical way, right? It's really great sounding if you know how to use it carefully, and with some of our users, it's one of our most popular sound sources, right? And then for filter models, we've got, ladders. We've got sort of multipole nonlinear filters. We've got a diode ladder. We've got some really unique filters from Japan. We've got, comb filters in a bunch of ways. We've got classic SVFs. We have, a large number of filter models. And for effects, we have reverbs, delays, choruses, some crazy things, a bank of tuned comb filters with feedback so you can make drums sing, things like that, are all in the filter section. And we have a modulator set that can modulate all of that with LFOs. We have a really nice multi-segment generator. We're really proud of that piece of work. And another great example of teamwork. Where the first version of that I coded kind of made everyone's eyes burn, and we've also added more recently, about a few years ago, we added the ability to write your own modulation sources using Lure. In the upcoming release, which we're hoping to get out this year, you can also craft wavetables with Lure. We're adding a bunch of company filter models coming in, some new effects coming in, so constantly expanding it. And that's available both in the plugin, but then we also took all of that DSP code, almost all that DSP code, all the relevant DSP code, and put it into VCV-Rack, which is a modular, a virtual modular system. And we've been taking that DSP code and basically factoring it into libraries, which is a very code-centric way of saying making so we can use it again. So a lot of that code is showing up now in Short Circuit, which is a sampler project we're working on, is being used in a variety of other places as well. one of the ways that I've been working on testing the APIs that we write is I write little plugins myself as little side quests. And so we just released one with, 2 filters and a couple of step sequencers as a test. Those sorts of things, like lots of reuse of the software and trying to think a lot about how do we make it available for use outside of just Surge. So, the Surge effects can be things that get used in 5 other synths as well, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
I had no idea about all the Lua scripting stuff that you were doing in there. So is that kind of the engine behind everything, or is that an optional?
No, it's a user-facing. Do you have Surge running now? If you have Surge running now, if you look at the little modulators down at the bottom, the last modulator in the 2x4 grid says F equals AX plus B. If you choose that as a modulator source and then click on the waveform, it brings up a Lua scripter, and you can write a function that returns the modulation output. So users write their own. Basically, what happened is Surge was getting more popular, and people were saying, can I do this with a modulator? Can I do that with a modulator? Can I do this with a modulator? Can I do that with a modulator? And one day, I think it might have been while we were still on Slack, but it was either on Slack or Discord. I think I said something like, screw you all, I'm just going to add a scheme interpreter, ha, ha, ha. And someone said, well, actually. And so then we added LuaJIT, which is an amazing piece of software, and used that to allow people to start scripting the controls. We didn't allow them to script audio. It's not quite fast enough to do audio scripting, and we use 4-way vector processing through the whole thing, and so on and so forth. But for the control environments, the modulators and so on and so forth, it works really well. And we're also, like I said, in the next version, or in our nightly now, using it so you can write code to generate wavetables. And so you write a piece of software that does the mathematical version of each frame. And again, that just prints the wavetable, right? So it doesn't actually have to run at audio time. It can cache the frames, and then the wavetable oscillator can use that like any other stored source, right?
Oh, that's very cool. I had no idea about that.
Surge contains multitudes. It's one of its one of its problems is that it's not in the least bit minimalist.
Yeah. Well, that whole modulation routing area of Surge, because how far back does a synth go? It's about 2005, I think. Yeah. And I mean that if you look at Bitwig and the modulation capabilities of Bitwig, you can see that there was a progression, so to speak, from what Claes was doing back with the synthesizer, and that's actually made its way into his next project, which is Bitwig as well, which is quite renowned for its modulation capability. So, yeah, very, very interesting. Now, one question I've got for you is that because I was just having a bit of a bounce around, and I was finding some earlier videos of Surge, and this is pre-Surge XT. It looked very, very similar. Yeah. Now, and reading some interviews of yours as well. So at some point, you moved it to Juice. Now, what was it prior to that? And is that
the original source that got open sourced was based on VST GUI, which is a framework from our friends at Steinberg,
right?
And essentially hand-implemented versions of the plugin. So a hand-implemented VST3 and a hand-implemented audio unit, and no standalone.
Right.
For a variety of reasons, mostly involving wanting to do some expansive things in the UI that VST GUI couldn't do, we chose to move to chose to do a big replatforming of Juice. And look, part of this was it was February 2021. The human interaction you had with other human beings had to be intermediated by a computer. I was. Yep. So, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We all remember those times.
Yep.
Do we have social distancing to thank for modern Surges?
I think if you talk to anyone who's shipping soft synths, the interest in soft synths and plugins during COVID was higher than it is now. I think that's a real factor, right?
Yep.
Although, if I could trade Surge for COVID, I would not have Surge, obviously, right? Yeah. The thing we decided, sort of one of those things where it was February, and it was when I was writing the first version of the formula modulator after we'd released the old version of Surge 1.9. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't make the Lua scripting editor work in VST GUI for a couple of reasons. Doesn't matter what. And we'd been talking about porting to Juice forever. And so I just sort of sat there. I remember sitting there for an hour thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? How are we going to do this? This is going to just, take us offline for months with no progress at all to give us the same UI. Right. But then we did it. And, it's one of those moments where you sit there and you think this is impossible. How you're going to do it. And then you realize a key trick. And a key trick I used was we didn't use all of VST GUI. We used a subset of it. And so I implemented that subset of VST GUI in Juice so that the thing could still use the old APIs and then port over. And then I just started removing that porting layer. So I actually had something I could run and we could test. And that's how we did that. And that got us a whole bunch of things, including, by the way, once Juice 6 or 7 came out, I forget which one it was maybe late 6 or early 7. It got us access to cross-platform accessibility support. And with that, we got a group of blind and vision impaired musicians who use assistive technologies and screen readers who were able to fully use the synth, which is a really neat, really satisfying part. And so, two of the biggest communities around Surge are microtonalists and people using screen reader and assistive technologies, because we were sort of, and, of course, the intersection of that group isn't there are people in the intersection of that group. I'm not saying there were, but those two communities have sort of found their way to the project pretty happily because we,
because you supported them,
we supported them, and frankly, because I think we didn't have an ROI constraint, right?
Right.
If I'd have said, if I was selling Surge for $49 and, I needed to make so many sales and so on and so forth, would I have made all those choices? Would we have made all those choices? Would people have done the same thing? I think not. And so, it is kind of nice to have it be a community driven, non-commercial activity for the reason that, those of us with the privilege to be able to spend a bit of time screwing around with it can then screw around with it.
Yeah. I mean, the accessibility for the people that are visually impaired, that's an amazing area. I've got a couple of clients that are legally blind, and they can get around a computer just as fast as anyone that I know. It's absolutely amazing. And if I'm on a kind of a support call with them, and all I can hear is just the chattering in the background, and I'm thinking, well, how the hell do they make sense of that? But they do. It is absolutely astonishing, and they kind of tend to. They tend to veer towards a particular DAW as well, and I'm wondering if that's just because of the way that the layout is of the instruments and the DAW.
So is that DAW Reaper?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think so. I mean, not to name names, I think they were earliest to have extended accessible support, and they have a bunch of plugins that work, and they have this Osara thing that interacts with accessible. I think they did the work super early on to make it screen reader usable. And then you kind of get a whole bunch of plugins where you see the parameter listed in Reaper, and then you go to the plugin window and you get a black box and your screen reader says NS Windows 73 or, HWind 0x49238. And you're like, this thing doesn't support screen readers at all.
Yeah.
But when you tab into Surge, it says Surge XT, Oscillator 1, type, classic. And, you tab through it and the screen reader says all the right things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was really fun doing that, because again, it was a piece. I knew some about accessible technologies from the web, but I had no idea how it worked in C++. And it was kind of really neat to do. And again, a thing where if I had done it, absent that feedback and testing and documentation and usage, it wouldn't have worked. It was a real team effort. Including from the Juice team, who actually did a lovely job building a cross-platform accessible API into the toolkit.
Yeah. Well, we had Jules on a while back. It has been quite a while back now, Pete. If we think about it, it's probably been 18 months. So, we had Jules on, who was the original founder of Juice. He's still the lead developer over at Traction. Doing the waveform DAW, and now is working on Chalk, right? That's his new thing. Yeah, that's right.
Which I haven't spent a lot of time on.
That's right. Yeah, he had some other project that he was working on as well. But I mean, what an amazing piece of software that whole Juice platform was, and
is like. What?
Sorry.
What? It's 70-80% of the plugins you use it, I bet?
I would probably hazard to guess it's actually higher. than that.
Yeah, look, there's a few big series that don't. I mean, obviously the Steinberg ones use Steinberg Kit, and there's some really lovely plugins that don't, but many of them do.
Yeah. I think they've got a large percentage. I think 80. What did you say? 80, 85. That's probably been. That's probably. I reckon it's above 90. But
we're going to get down to an exact percentage of the plugin market here. It's 86.7%.
Let's pause for a second. I'll run strings on my plugin directory.
Well, I tell you, look, you know what they say about statistics. You know what they say about statistics, guys. We just make something up. 89.3%. There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
That's also the percentage of statistics that are false.
Yeah.
Anyways,
percentage of that statement that was false. Yeah.
Oh, great. So, yes. So Surge XT was the Juice version, correct?
Yeah, the Surge XT was Juice, but then a couple of other features, including the beginning of the Lua scripting. And, of course, look, there's always bug fixes, right? The other thing we did with Surge XT was we added a new parameter, like new names and IDs for all our parameters. So it was not, it was patch compatible, but not DAW automation compatible with the old Surge XT. So we gave it a new ID.
Right.
And that allowed us to do things like add more filter, add more effects, and, clean up some things that would have made that transition hard in the old code base as well.
Yeah.
So XT, is there a meaning behind that, or is it just, XT is cool?
As I said, it's a team effort, and I'm terrible at names, and so I really do sort of, as long as it's not called, synth, I'm pretty happy. We talked a lot about it. My only hard constraint was not call it Surge 2, because then it would never ship. Although now we're thinking about a project called XT2, which I sometimes worry will never ship. So we thought about XL or XT or XB, blah, blah, blah. And so we just landed on XT, and no one was unhappy with it. And so that was the name. And so there we go. Yeah.
So no special meaning.
It does not mean extraterrestrial spelled wrong or anything like that. No.
I thought there were aliens involved, damn it.
Exactly. Or at least Reese's peanut butter cups.
Yeah.
Reese's Pieces. Sorry, damn it. I blew the joke with the wrong Reese's candy.
What's Reese's? Oh, sorry. We don't have Reese's in Australia. Sorry.
So remember the Steven Spielberg movie E.T. the Extraterrestrial?
Yeah.
So the candy that he ate were Reese's Pieces, which is like an M&M or a Smartie that has peanut butter on the inside.
Got it.
And so I was making that joke, figuring Pete would also get it, but then I got the joke wrong.
It, but
yeah.
I wasn't going to give you shit about the peanut butter cups. It's all good. It's basically the same thing.
Oh, now, eek. I remember. Oh, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I've spent enough time in America to know to avoid those things.
Like Australia has anything other than licorice for you to eat. So, yeah.
What are you talking about? We've got some of the best chocolate in the world, Pete. Don't start there with the Aussie bashing again.
No, because next you're going to tell me you have the best coffee in the world over in Melbourne.
We
and
do.
That's where we're going to go.
Every Australian thinks they have the best coffee in the world. This is true. This is not a fight worth having, Pete. Just admit defeat. Australia has the best coffee in the world.
Come on. You guys think coffee is what's that coffee? What's that?
We conceded the coffee point, Finn. We can move on.
Yeah, because I was about to bring up that coffee franchise that you guys think is coffee. What's it called?
Dunkin' Donuts.
No.
Starbucks.
That's the one.
Dunkin' is I'm originally from Massachusetts. Dunkin' is coffee.
Dunkin' is coffee.
Starbucks is motor oil. I'm not really interested in it.
There's probably some Italians in the back end there, actually, and knowing how to make their coffee. But Starbucks, I've had American.
No, we concede. Vin.
None of us are picking this fight with you.
Oh, okay.
We're all good.
All right. Yeah. Geez, they folded like a deck of cards, guys.
Well, we know what the listeners want to hear, and it's not this.
Oh no, I think they'd rather hear about the coffee stuff.
No.
That's true. Let's talk about open source licenses instead.
Paul, if there's anything
speaking of which, speaking of which,
well, hang on.
Need to get back
have we finished going sidetracking? Have we? Oh, okay. All right.
No, go ahead, Vin.
I was about to say, if anyone has been listening in, there's one thing that's actually a constant on this show, is that we get sidetracked and we end up down some of these rabbit warrens that had nothing to do with what we're discussing. But it's okay. You guys have conceded the coffee, right? So we'll head back to what we were discussing. What?
I don't know, but somehow you're going to edit this to make it sound like we were terrible, and you just brought us all back in line.
No.
Yeah,
Well,
we were talking about the Surge feature set.
Well, the feature set.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go.
Yeah.
I've got one. I'll bring it back in line. Ready?
Yep. Okay.
MPE.
Oh, MPE, sure. MIDI polyphonic expression.
Go.
What a clever hack MPE is, right? Which is, I don't want to change the MIDI wire standard or binary representation in any way, but I would like to have control over each individual note. Right. And the idea, and I know some people whose idea it might be, but I don't want to give credit to the idea because I don't actually know whose idea it was. But the idea to say, okay, well, instead of 16 channels, I have a global channel and 15 monosynths, and that's the way everything will work, was really, really, really clever. I think that's a really neat idea. And so the first thing about MPE is you just realize that you have 15 individually controllable monosynths. And once you realize that, you kind of see how it all hangs together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think, well, what do I want to send down that? And then you say, okay, well, I can send pitch bend. I can send controls. I can send aftertouch. And so then you get things like, channel aftertouch to a monosynth is per channel, but it's a monosynth. So that's essentially polyphonic aftertouch, but we'll use the channel aftertouch instead because not everything, all those decisions are inside MPE. But the upshot of it is you can actually write pretty expressive instruments where if you cap your number of controlled voices at 15, you can control each voice individually.
Right.
And that's pretty handy. And look, that inspired, we haven't talked about clap yet, but I know we're going to. A lot of the ideas for sort of the polyphonic modulation in clap, and a lot of the ideas that are in MIDI to UMP note control are an extension of that. Yep. Namely, I would like to be able to make a statement about a note in the MIDI and MPE space or a voice in the clap space, and they're slightly different things. And be able to continue to change features of just that voice through a targeted property. That's a really interesting way to make polyphonic instruments with a high degree of electronic control. And so I think MPE is a great way to start that. I can't wait for MIDI 2 to be everywhere and us to start being able to code that. And I think that'll be really, once we get to 2028 and people start actually using that in anger in soft synths and DAWs and stuff like that. No, it's like, it's the lead time on actually getting the stuff working is going to be about that long.
Well, I'm hoping it's going to be before that.
So, right. So I said using in anger, not using, right? So
right.
Look, there's this guy at Microsoft who needs to get it finished.
Hey, I'll have you know, we accidentally released bits into 25H2 this past weekend, which has caused me no end of headaches today, but yes.
That must have been a fun Tuesday for you.
Yeah.
No, but sorry. The amazing work Pete's doing. And, there's good support in Mac OS and Core MIDI. And the Linux crowd has, the variety of ways of supporting it as well, right?
And also supports it. Yeah.
Yeah, also exactly right. And then once you actually get that into the OS reliably so that it can get to the DAWs reliably, so it can get to the synths, and then the lead time for that to become, something where we're all editing MIDI 2 note expressions on every single note in our editor of choice. I think that's a couple of years still, but it's going to be a great couple of years.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be super exciting.
The plus side is since you took a dependency on Juice, they've already started a lot of that work. So they have a preview branch of Juice that's got MIDI 2 support, including for Windows. So
yeah. And look, we have, the clap protocol has MIDI 2 support in it as well. And so, I wrote a MIDI 2 synth that we ran in, one native clap host that had MIDI 2 support on Mac OS. And it was really neat. Like it's definitely coming. It's going to be very exciting. And, I think assuming there are still any musicians as opposed to computer nerds listening to this, right? the degree of musical expressivity that you'll get by being able to do those, much more fully featured controls, and much higher resolution controls and do it on a note level, not a full instrument level, I think is going to be, it's going to be pretty exciting. I think people will be able to make some really interesting music with it.
Yeah.
You were talking about like microtuning and stuff earlier. And then when you start having like direct pitch in MIDI messages and things, that really opens you up to a lot of audiences.
Yeah. I agree. And look, the original MTS standard is from the 80s, right? The TX81Z supported it, right? You could send a MIDI tuning table with, I think it was, it's like you could do 3 cent per note retunings, intervals for each of your, I forget exactly how it is, right? It was one of those MIDI things, but so which is how a lot of that sort of hardware microtuning in the 90s ended up happening as well. But the idea that you could actually have that tuning be in your stream, I think is really, really interesting. But not just tuning, timbre, but also, with all these things, like who knows what the hell people are going to make with it, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, you make auto tune and then you get share, and then all of a sudden you get that James Blake record, and that James Blake record is really, really good, and you wouldn't have thought to use it that way, right?
Yeah.
Those things, these technologies in the hands of people who don't have the constraints of imagining how the technology was before it are really, really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, coming back to the microtuning, I mean, those early adventures, we'll call them adventures, in the 80s and the 90s, a lot of that was to do with making the instruments compatible with ethnic tunings, Oriental and Arabic tunings are not equal 12-tone equal tempered. They're all kind of a little bit all over the place comparatively. And if you listen to any of that music, there's always a very unique type of flow to those notes. And the level of microtuning you've got now is far beyond that, obviously. But they had to kind of work within set parameters of.
Yeah, but hold on. So look, I think a lot of the folks who use the microtuning in Surge, I know a lot of the folks who use the microtuning in Surge still use them for those, historical Western and non-Western tunings, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of people exploring the Arabic scales of Makama. We have a bunch of people who are one of the biggest contributors to the project. Does a whole bunch of work on Scandinavian folk music and just intonation, right? And how, because like this idea that a piano is tuned in equal instruments, so your fifth is always kind of screwed up. This is a new idea, right? This is an idea from 1810, 1820, right? And so maybe a little earlier than that, right? People in the Surge tuning channel are going to listen to this podcast and then scream at me for picking a date, and they point out that there was evidence of a
it was 1819, damn it.
Exactly. They're actually all lovely people, and none of them would ever scream at me, but they will tell me the date I should have used on that soundbite in this podcast. But look, so that construction of music that is not simply in the tuning that we've picked in the last 150 years in Western composed and popular music, I think it's doing a lot of stuff. And so you get definitely really interesting things like, like the 19 and 34 tone scales, and people on a Lumatone who are doing like, the octave into 34 and playing jazz on a piano and stuff like that, right? Like really interesting stuff. But then there was also a lot of that historically inspired intonation and culturally inspired intonation that I think is an important part of the microtuning community.
I was about to ask, can we just roll back a little bit to clap? Because there's people going to be listening and going, what are they actually talking about? Because we should explain what clap is, which is a new plugin format.
So clap is a plugin format like VST3 or Audio Unit or VST2 or LV2 or RTAS or DirectX.
Wow, is that still around? I don't think.
No,
my bingo card's full now.
Or AAX. I'll drop AAX in there as well, right? So this is a thing of which we have plenty. But de facto in the market today, VST3, Audio Unit, LV2, Clap, and AAX.
So what's LV2?
LV2 is one that emerged from the Linux community.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But works on all platforms.
Right.
Is supported in some DAWs off of Linux and many DAWs on Linux.
Yep.
So the purpose of the Clap project was really in response to a couple of, I think, things that were difficult about VST3, including in some sense the VST3 license, which is a challenging document in some senses. Some of the clauses in that I think have given folks some pause, but also a variety of I could talk at length about technical differences between Clap and VST3 that make Clap substantially easier to program. But the big one is essentially everything runs through a single event queue, which is type change as opposed to multiple queues you have to merge yourself. And the API is a C API as opposed to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, as opposed to COM. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to COM-like, exactly. Not COM, but almost
Yeah,
COM,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
The upshot is a group of us, including some folks in the open source community and a large number of people in the closed source community, thought that it was time to think a little bit about what's the standard that we could use to write plugins in two ways. First of all, write plugins to project into DAWs that adopted that had expanded features. And there are some really neat features in Clap that the other plugin formats don't have. But second of all, be a basis for our internal development that we could then project onto VST3 or AU or so on and so forth, right? Because Juice, and Juice is a lovely piece of software and I love it, but their approach to writing a plugin is you essentially write a lowest common denominator plugin and then don't get the features of the advanced features of the higher order formats. So for instance, Juice currently doesn't support, I know they're going to fix this, it currently doesn't support sample accurate automation. It doesn't support note expressions. And so we took the approach with Clap is if there was a simple enough API that supported a variety of things we thought were important, even if it wasn't adopted as an end user product, it would be useful for all of us to do our internal development. Then we could project it onto higher resolution versions of those formats, which we've successfully done. And, there's a few synths out there that are working that way now, including I released an FM synth last year as a little sort of side quest project called 6 Signs that you can go check out on the BaconPaul GitHub. Which is kind of a crazy FM synth. It turned out to be really fun. It sort of did a little speed dash in December and January of last year to see if I could write an FM synth in that period. And a
6-op FM synth just for fun.
A six op FM synth with no filters and no effects. And everyone who asked for a filter, I said, you don't need a filter. It's a 6-op FM synth. Right. And they went away sad, right?
And you only need one slider and it's all good.
Well, no, it does have 732 knobs on the front panel.
See, now you've screwed up the format.
Right. So actually, what it should really have is 2 buttons you click back and forth and a tiny little LED. Then it would really feel like programming an FM synth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but the conceit of that synth is that each and every knob has associated with it an LFO, an envelope, and modulation sources. And so you have a separate envelope for each member of the matrix and each source tuning and each level and stuff like that. And so it turns out to be for people who understand FM well, there's some really amazing sounds can get generated with it, which was fun.
So like Chowning will get it. Everybody else is confused.
Yeah, I don't know. My eyes are watering.
So Pete, I described, I was talking to another dev who was working on a project. And, we realized that, he wanted to think about a synth where it was a little harder to do some sound design, and actually said to me, the thing about my synth is it's hard to make a bad sound. And in your synth, it's kind of the exact opposite, right? I'm like, okay, thanks. But, another great example of a community thing, actually, by the way, when I released 6 Signs, over on KVR, and KVR has its pluses and minuses, as we all know. But one of the friendlier communities in KVR is the One Synth Challenge community. And, and they did a month. They did a month with 6 Signs before the synth was done, and there was this lovely. I could finish my track if it just did this. And I sat down at GitHub. I'm like, download the new Lightly and do it, which was really a fun example that led to one of the users doing a great set of videos about the synth on how FM works. It became part of the manual. This community feedback angle worked there as well.
And it's not a whole SoundCloud stream of nothing but EP1 or something like that.
That's right. In fact, if you go and listen to the sort of the top 5 tracks that came out of that, there are really, really remarkable pieces of musicianship and sound design. And a lot of those people contributed their patches back. So now they're in the synth when you download the patch and stuff, but that was one of the first things that we used to test this theory of, I can just write a clap and then project it into these other formats. And, I don't want to say One Synth Challenge was a bunch of testers we got for free, but there were a bunch of testers we got for free. And so there's this doesn't work in Ableton, and I got this hang here. And did you know the sample rate's wrong in this condition in Logic, right? All those things became fixes back upstream to a piece of shared software that we're now using to do that projection. But, that's an awfully long way of saying Clap is a new plugin standard that some of the DAWs support directly. Studio One, Bitwig, Reaper. I'm sure I have missed Fruity Loops. FL Studio, and several open source projects as well. But also that we're using more and more in the sort of the clap community to put VST3 and VST2 at the edge of our development platform as opposed to the center of our development platform because of those license concerns, right?
Yeah.
And folks should know it's clap like clap your hands, and it's clever audio plugin, right?
That's what it stands for, right?
Yes, the free audio /clap, I think is the GitHub URL, and I think it's cleveraudio.org is the website.
So what a surprise that that our friends at Steinberg haven't implemented it.
Well, so look, I mean, why would they? Look, Vin, there's enough opportunity for people to write software here that I don't need to think about it competitively. It's not that VST3 wins and Clap loses. It's that Clap solves a problem for a group of people that then allow them to write audio software that they're proud of, right? And so I don't think of it as, it's like, is Logic better than Cubase, right? Is like, are the Beatles better than the Rolling Stones, right? The answer to both those questions is yes, but they're not worth arguing about, right?
Yeah. But I take it from the approach. I remember when it was first announced, and I said to Pete, do we really need another plugin format? Now, don't crucify me for that, but I'm just saying, do we really need another plugin format? And it's the same with when people say, I'm going to write another DAW. I've gone, why? Knock yourself out. But
So I some part of me wishes we hadn't, but I think those license concerns with VST3, I think those license concerns with VST3 and the associated governance are real concerns that commercial entities will have, right?
Of course, 100%. Can you just real quickly, and the main guys behind Clap was, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was Claes Johanson, there was
Alexandra Beek, who's also a Bitwig and
he's
Yuhi.
a Bitwig, yep.
Yeah, and then Urs
from
Yuhi,
yep,
right?
Yep.
And then Gal Bremers, who writes a plugin, a DAW called MTS Studio.
Yeah, Multitrack Studio.
Yeah, Multitrack Studio, right?
He's been super active on the MIDI 2 project here.
Super active on MIDI 2, exactly right. So he's the one who has actually a full MIDI 2 clap host, and that's where I wrote my MIDI 2 clap plugin to test the UMP integration. And then, I spent quite a lot of time on it, as did a few other people, right? I'm one of the reviewers and reviewers on the project, right? I wrote clap info. I wrote the bindings to Juice. I wrote the example plugin on the first weekend. Those sorts of things.
All right. Okay.
Nice. And it's, I think his name's pronounced Heel Bremers, if I remember correctly.
I apologize. This is the thing about doing everything intermediated by GitHub and Discord, which is I have no idea. I mean, other than Pete Brown, which I think I guessed how to pronounce. I have no idea I had no idea how to pronounce anyone's name. So I apologize for everyone whose name I've mangled in this podcast.
Oh, it's okay. We've mangled names.
I was calling Vin Curigliano for a while there. So yeah. Yeah. We've only known each other 15 plus years, Pete, and you still can't pronounce my surname, even though I actually pronounce it correctly at the start of every podcast. Yeah, and when you pronounce Maryland correctly, then we'll talk about your name.
Are we going to go back to why I call it Maryland again? Do we have to do it every show?
No.
Is this because the coffee's better? I think that's why.
It's simply because in Australia we have what is conventionally known as Maryland chicken, right, which is a cut of chicken of some description. And, for years I was saying Maryland, and Pete wasn't correcting me. And then some guy had a bit of a meltdown on the forum going, Mary, with the two words, Maryland. And I've gone, well, what's the problem here? And he just said, well, Vin, it's actually pronounced Maryland. And I've gone, it's pronounced what? So I know how to pronounce it correctly.
You just choose not to because you're that kind of guy.
No, I do it. Yeah. I do it as a favor to you, Pete, because
I appreciate it.
You said you prefer Maryland because it sounds
like a happy place.
Happy place, Disneyland. There you go.
Yeah.
I can't believe you gave me shit about Maryland again.
Why not? Like, that's what I'm here for, Vin.
No worries, Mr. Soda.
I'll get
Soda.
So, at least I don't have my Massachusetts accent anymore, and then we'd really be talking.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, see, we got completely sidetracked again.
Anyway, so we're talking about Clap.
Yeah, we're talking about Clap.
Talking about Clap.
That's what
which every time I say that, I have to force myself not to think of the bad connotations.
We had a long conversation about that.
Yeah.
It's very catchy.
One of the features that I'd alluded to earlier was the full polyphonic modulation,
yes,
right, which is really, really neat. and it's supported in Bitwig, and it's really clever, which is that there's a plugin and host intercommunication, not just about a note, but about a voice. And the difference between a note and a voice is a note has an on moment and an off moment. The voice continues well after that off moment, right? There's a release phase of your voice. And so if you implement polyphonic modulation in Clap, the plugin has a message it sends back to the host that says, this voice you started with this note ID is now over. And that can be before or after the note off, by the way. Once you have that done, you can actually construct modulators that target a voice and know its lifetime and start and stop them.
So something with like a really long release.
Yeah, sure. Like let's say you wanted to modulate the release of a pad with a 10-second release, and you wanted to modulate the sound in the release with a note expression. You couldn't because there's no more note, right? And UMP has this problem as well, by the way, right? Those note targeted controllers, as far as I could understand, are for the duration of the note, not the duration of the voice. But so anyway, that's I'm sure we'll figure that out. There's a variety of ways you can do it, including just continuing to listen to those messages after the release. But that allows us to do things. Allows the Bitwig team to do things in collaboration with the synth, where you can write much smaller synths that are much more robust, and then put things like envelopes on controls that live with the voice. And so one of the tests we did at the very outset of Clap is I wrote a tiny little synth. You can still download it, the Clapsaw demo. It's what we've used to test lots and lots of claps, which didn't have an AEG and didn't have an FEG, didn't have an amplitude envelope and didn't have a filter envelope, right? It just had a VCA that had a level and a time that the note ran afterwards, right? And so basically you can think about each note as having a brick wall envelope, and then it was the job of outside to go ahead and do it. And then you set up an envelope in Bitwig as a modulator per voice, and you can go ahead and do all that outside the synth, right? And that was sort of an example of that. And that idea of that collaboration between your composition environment and your modulation environment getting more robust is an idea that you get through things like note expressions or UMP or Clap Polymod. And I think it's going to be a pretty exciting place in the back half of this decade for electronic music.
It really expands what you can do with the plugin without the plugin having to think of everything up front. So yeah,
that's right. And if we do it right, and if frankly, Bitwig, Cubase, Ableton, Reaper, and Logic all implement it, right, and FL, then you kind of get this motivation where you can start writing much smaller but really interesting plugins, right? Here's a really interesting voice starting point, right? Here's an interesting voice up to the filter, right? Have fun with any modulation you want to do. You don't have the cost of writing an entire synth. And so that sort of environment I think could be pretty exciting. It's one of the things I was most excited about.
Modular versus fully boxed synths.
Yeah. So, but not quite modular in the, let's spend $15,000 for something that puts off more heat than my fridge and is and plays one voice into a filter, right?
I feel personally attacked by this conversation.
Look, I was going to say I'm not a hardware guy, but I'm surrounded by guitars, but I'm really not a synth hardware guy. And look, modular is lovely, and some people have made some beautiful music with it, but it is
and fart sounds.
And fart sounds. There was
a contest for that, if I recall.
Any joke I make about the best fart sound you can make on a modular synth is going to get someone yelling at me in the comments. So I'm just going to skip that altogether.
Come on, this comment bait, that.
Exactly. I'll go have some Dunkin' in Maryland. But look, the flexibility to, I think, write perhaps smaller components could be really something that gets opened up in that time period. Because look, writing a soft synth is kind of hard still, right?
Yeah, you have to build all the building blocks yourself,
Yeah. And, we've been doing a lot of work of taking Surge and making it into building blocks that are easier to assemble, right? And so now I can use those libraries and put together a new plugin in a couple of days that, we have this templatized voice manager and standalone effects and filters that are independent and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. A lot of work to get there. And still that's, it's still a pain in the ass. And then that assumes that things like how to run a compiler, how to build a DLL, how to use InnoSetup to make an installer because Windows doesn't have a built-in installer mechanism or something like, whatever the hell, right? Although I think it does, which is MSI, but no one uses it or something. I've never figured out Windows.
Now, Inno creates MSI, but
gotcha.
Still. Yeah.
Anyway, let's argue about Windows installers is the least interesting thing I think we could probably put in this podcast.
Oh my God, no, let's not.
It's just,
let's talk about licensing for installers.
Exactly right. Maybe we can just, instead of making installers, we can just put it in the latest release of H2.
Yeah.
But so sorry, where was I?
We're talking about external modulation of clap plugins.
So right. So the idea that, there's this massive activation energy to construct one of these things, and they have to be complete, and they have to be compelling, and they have to be financially viable, right? It's a hard business, right? Yeah. And it's one of the few businesses left where there really are independent software developers, right? Where you actually have 4 or 5 people or 2 or 3 people shops that can actually have an industry leading product and sell it. Right? But still that bar is high and the granularity feels very, very open for disruption. And look, if you look at how Live and Bitwig work, right? Watch YouTube videos of people using those, and a lot of the action is in that gutter with little things that do little things.
Yeah. You'll have a long chain of little modulators and stuff.
A long chain of little modulators and thises and that's and the others, right? Or, look at, I record my band in Logic and we don't even have any synths, but the chain of effects I have on the drum mics to make them sound good, right? You get these sort of long sets of components that you put together, but we don't think about synth plugins in quite the same way because that modulation is such an important musical experience and it hasn't been externalized. And so I think that can be pretty neat.
So is clap just for synths, or do you do effects?
No, so clap is an N in, N out MIDI audio, any topology you want. So it has concepts of synth, but it also has effects, and it has note effects as well, right? We've got sequencers, we have audio effects, MIDI translators, all those things running, and all the topologies are there. I've been talking about synths because we started it with synths, but you can do the exact same trick with effects. It's not polyphonic in the same way, but there's also non-destructive modulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, right. So it's basically the same thing as polyphonic modulation, except it's monophonic, right? And so you essentially get, for a non-destructive modulatable parameter, you get 2 input channels. You get the value, and then you also get the current modulation of the value. So you can do things like effect change without blowing up your preset and stuff like that. But if you do that in a VST3, it'll actually wiggle the knob and change the preset and kick on the dirty flag and things like that.
Right. And so I actually thought Vin would be interested in this as well. So one of the things I saw about clap that was somewhat unique was the approach you had to thread management.
Oh, yeah, the thread pool.
Yeah. So this is something that gives much more control to if I understand correctly, to the plugins to be able to do multi-threaded work efficiently, right?
Well, so there's no way I can answer this question without getting deeply technical. So
no, that's all good.
Yeah, fine. So, but get that 15-second forward button ready. So if you write a multi-threaded, I'm going to use synth as an example here because it's mostly synths that have this problem. A multi-threaded synth. You have a problem in that you have to spin up those threads yourself, right? And when you spin up those threads, you need to make sure they're real-time threads and they're not in contention with other threads on the system and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on, right? One of the insights that Alex and Urs and the team at Yuhi had and at Bitwig was that the DAW is already doing a job of managing those threads, right? The DAW already has a collection of real-time threads it's using for rendering.
Yeah.
And if you set up another set of real-time threads in your plugin that are invisible to the DAW, then they'll contest, right? So what the thread pool plugin does is it allows a plugin to, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to process and I'm going to manage threads myself, its process method essentially says, okay, to complete this process block, I need to do 10 pieces of work numbered 1 through 10. And then the DAW will, in its own thread pool, in a way that doesn't contend with other things that the DAW is doing, call you back in the audio process from its managed threads. Right?
Yep.
So this does 2 things. First of all, it relieves the plugin developer of the obligation of learning how to do cross-platform real-time thread priority and all those other things. It's just a nightmare. And second of all, it allows 4 multi-threaded plugins to run on your machine and not contest with each other if they use this API. And so when, there are a couple of big plugins that are, Diva is the biggest one, right? Which is a pretty heavy duty plugin, and that got like just 20% faster out of the box from from integrating its thread management with the DAW, and sharing the thread pool with the Bitwig thread pool, right? So it essentially turns the DAW into as opposed to, you think about a DAW now as a single threaded topologically ordered sequencer for your music, right? You have to run this synth before that effect, before this, blah, 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 right? It has a threading model because it knows the topology of your plugins. And so it can say this channel and this channel are independent, so I can run those on separate threads and then collect over there. It allows the plugin to participate in that thread pooling activity without contending with it. In a way that has worked pretty well, and both Bitwig and Reaper I know implement it now. I don't know if other DAWs do, and have seen pretty substantial gains in plugins that use it.
Right now, so this is clap, right? Because trying to attempt to do that, have the independent plugin or virtual instrument multi-threaded in any of the conventional DAWs. Oh boy, we can head down a rabbit warren, but there's. I've had experiences where, like, let's just say, for example, Native Instruments Contact for many, many years used to be able to be run with its multi-threading on, and it would be a multi-timbral type of configuration, maybe up to 16 instruments. You can go up to 64 actually, but let's just say 16 instruments. You turn your multi-threading on, and it used to work with, filling blank here, any of the DAWs reasonably well, but as the core counts actually started increasing, that started actually causing more, well, I don't know whether thread collision is actually the correct term at the code level, but it started getting more and more detrimental, where all of the DAW manufacturers, the developers, with their respective engines, especially when they went to a hybrid playback engine with the extended buffering routines, that they all recommended, and I'd say all of them recommended, that you turn off the multiprocessing on the actual plugins. And that, I think Diva copped the same type of problem as well, where they'd say you needed to switch off the multiprocessing in the individual plugins.
So look, on these modern computer architectures, if you're going to be using all the computer, which these scenarios would use all the computer, you need someone in charge of who gets what time slice other than the operating system to be efficient. The operating system will do okay. The operating system will work. But if you actually want full throughput on 8 cores, you want 8 threads pinned to 8 cores that run straight through with good vectorization inside each thread. And so, like, all these kind of things, it's not that simple. It's more complicated than that. But not having a conductor when you're using all your lanes is a problem, right? And so that's what the clap thread pool tried to address, and did so pretty successfully.
Yeah. And look, this is a much deeper discussion that Pete knows that I'm kind of very heavily involved with, which is the multi-processor, multi-threaded performance of modern DAWs and the engines and the current failings of it. So, I don't want to kind of sidetrack this podcast about, but it is an area that I'm still working extensively, and I even actually put another report out this week about where we were doing some extensive testing with the new thread rippers, and we were going from, let's just say, and we'll use the AMD CPUs as a perfect example. So if you've got a Ryzen 9950X, which is 16 core, 32 logical, or we'll call it 32 thread, but I know you guys. The term threads kind of makes your eye twitch because it means a different thing, right?
Hyperthread, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, SMT, but we'll call it logical cores, right? And then we had a thread ripper, which was 32 physical cores, 64 logical. And you would think, okay, well, how are the DAWs going to scale to those upper core counts? And with my DAWbench project, I've got some empirical tests that we can incrementally and empirically increase the loads so that you'll see that the threading actually looks very, very uniform. But that's not the way we actually approach real world sessions. As soon as you start introducing things like groups and buses, things start getting very, very squirrely, right? And I have a test session that, it actually exposes the problems as soon as we start using grouping and busing and effect sends and that type of stuff into these multi-processor environments. And I can collapse the DAW engines, and there's only 15 to 20% resources being used in Task Manager. That's it. And the audio engines are collapsed. And this is something that's an ongoing thing. And even within Reaper, which is by far on the Windows platform the best at multi-thread management and large core multi-thread and thread management, it couldn't scale from 32 to 64 in this particular environment. I mean, I think the improvements are 1 to 8%, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. So look, here's a couple of things to think about. And I haven't done this test with the software you're talking about.
Yep.
But as soon as you have things like groups and buses and sends,
yep,
the problem is no longer parallel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like, when I talk to people who are because one of the things we get in the Surge community is a lot of people who show up, they're like, hey, I have some development experience. I'd like to do some audio development. Right. And it's one of the more satisfying things about the project is, people who sort of start that journey have started coming to the Surge community and starting with us here. Right.
Yep.
Which is really nice. But one of the things I always remind them is the job of Surge is every 48,000th of a second, it needs to put out a sample. Right. Like no ifs, ands, or buts. Right. And so really it's every 48,030 seconds over 32, it needs to put out 32 samples and all these other things, right? But a good sort of rule of thumb of these things is that's how fast it has to go. And now if you have 10 of those running all at once, you're in pretty good shape because that's actually not that heavy a load for a modern computer. But if you have 10 of them all running at once and then you have to collect them all into one place and then do it again, then all of a sudden the shape of your problem gets much harder. And you can't just divvy it up because you got to wait for all of those to finish so you can get their outputs and send it over here before you can do the next one. And that sort of problem, that shape of your graph, the shape of your network that you've built inside your DAW makes the problem no longer what's called embarrassingly parallel.
Yeah.
Right. So running 20 surges all at once is a good example of something that's embarrassingly parallel. Running 20 surges all at once and then sending them to 3 effects differently with different send levels starts to break that. And so I'm not surprised that these DAWs can't scale to, 64 cores. I mean, but also to scale to 64 cores, you're going to need a whole bunch of plugins as well, doing a whole bunch of work that are ordered independently from one another.
Yeah. What's interesting in this area, we won't get too sidetracked, but this is the body of my work that I've been focusing on for probably, Pete, 20 years. And the thing that we're kind of navigating at the moment is that we've got particular thread management routines that are being used with some of the more widely used DAWs that I think and again, Pete could probably speak a little bit more if I'm actually terming this incorrectly, but they're using more bespoke thread management routines within the DAWs, and they're trying to outsmart the Windows task scheduler, where for whatever reason, and there's different reasons per respective DAW that collapses the engines. If they actually allowed the thread management, if they handed it over to the Windows task scheduling and the independent thread management stuff like the Intel thread director, this is the thing that controls the priority of the threads on these new Intel hybrid processors that have got P&E cores, for example, and I'm using air quotes, right? When that's done really well, the thread management and the scaling is so far superior.
Yeah, I mean it's like Logic on my M1 Max. It scales really, really well.
Yeah, right. And you know who does it really, really well on Windows? Because they don't try and outsmart the Windows scheduler.
I'm guessing you're going to say Reaper because you said that before.
Yeah, 100%.
They're also smart guys. Yeah, right.
Where I'm arm wrestling, and fill in the blank, and it happens at different session logistics. But I've got clients that are absolutely crippled, and I'm literally crippled on a 16-core, 32-thread machine, where they're able to use maybe 10, 15%, and the things are collapsing in a heap. And the respective audio engines are completely overrun. And they're going, what do we do? I've gone, well, this is so deep in the core level of the thread management of the DAW, you have to change your session layout and logistics. They said, we can't. This is the way we work. Yeah. And the thing that is, and again, from a non-code perspective, the thing that kills me is that we can have the identical system, but the client is running a massive virtual instrument orchestral template. Sure. And it could have 300 instruments running at once. And guess what? It's load managing and the thread management is amazing. But then you get someone that's running at a mix stage and they've got, let's just say 40 tracks of audio, but it's all of a sudden we've got the thing that is actually grouped into sections.
I mean, so Vin, look, I was trained as a physicist, right? So you take limits.
Right.
If you think about a session, which is one track channel strip with 100 plugins in it.
Well, that's going to land on one core and collapse.
Exactly, right. There's no way to parallelize that.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
exactly. Well, so, I mean, there is no way to parallelize that because, you can't do A and B at the same time, right? You could maybe block shift, right? So if you had enough, you could stagger them somehow, right?
Like what Cakewalk, like Noel was talking about.
Yeah. And also Justin, Reaper does it as well, yeah.
Right. So you do block A and plug in one, and then block A goes to plug in B, and you do block B and plug in one, right? So you sort of have a time shift, which would add some latency issues, right? But even in that simple case, you start seeing that engineering a parallel problem is hard and has compromises. And look, it's just the two hardest things in C++ are memory management, threading, and off by one, right?
Off by one.
Thank you, Pete.
Especially the three hardest things are memory management and off by one errors.
Yeah, exactly right. So I did the opposite of that joke. Exactly right. But so look, this is just hard. And modern architectures, modern, right? I'm dating myself now, right? Modern architectures for the last 20 years have been based on the idea that we're not going to get single core performance as much as we're going to get multiple cores in the same fab, right? And so, it's a tough problem.
Yeah.
But that's why I was going into a little bit on the thread pool sharing that you have in Clap. I think it's an interesting way to deal with the problem because it just, Vin, you were talking about your orchestral template. That orchestral template may need dozens of threads to do what it's doing inside of it. And having the DAW aware of those and aware of the resources that are going to be used helps it schedule around it, I think, much better.
Yeah.
And also, look, if you have 4 cores that each are split, so you have 8 virtual cores, you really don't want 9 threads.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the MMCSS thing, Vin.
Oh, boy, here we go. The M word. You said it. You had to say the M word, didn't you?
Yeah.
So how's the coffee in Australia?
I hear Starbucks is awesome.
Yeah.
Pete and I were defending Duncan. I just want it on the record that Pete and I were defending Duncan.
Okay.
Yes, that's real coffee.
It's the thing on which America runs.
Yes. Time to make the donuts and all that.
Exactly. It's America runs on Duncan now. They changed it, right? And they dropped the donuts from the name. It's
Anyway. They make it sound like people exercise after Dunkin' Donuts. Like, I appreciate the thought, but no, that's try to sound healthy. Get your kale donut.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad I got us off that topic. So what else do we want to talk about today?
Hang on, where were we?
We were finishing up on threading for Clap, which I thought was really good. So lots of real benefits here for. Did you mention earlier, Paul? Like you said, Bitwig supports Clap. Bitwig Studio, I should say, supports Clap. Well, and it was Multitrack Studio supports Clap. What were the Studio One?
So Reaper has it. Studio One has it. FL has it. I feel like I'm missing one.
Does Cakewalk? Does Sonar have it?
No, I don't believe Sonar does.
Okay.
I know there's other teams out there working on it. I know. And a Q Tractor supports it, which is an open source DAW. There's a couple of other folks, right?
Does N-Track have it?
I don't know.
Not sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you have a generic host that people can load up plugins in and try it?
Yeah, I mean, so we have the Clap wrapper actually has a standalone which could act as a generic host. We haven't made it that way. There's a Clap host project as well that we released that kind of lets you go ahead and do it. That's written with Qt. We have a Clap info project that loads you up and prints all your information. That's the beginning of a host. I think folks have found. It's one of those things that I think folks have found relatively easy to work with. The API is. From a programming perspective, really the key insight that Alex had, and I think this is really from a programming perspective, the brilliant thing is the whole thing is just one queue, right? So there's an in queue and an out queue to your process block, and all your messages come there with a sample time and a type and then a payload. And then you just reinterpret cast them to what you know them to be and then go ahead and pull the information out. And so you get a very easy, very simple processing model of just here's the set of events you have to deal with in the course of processing. And once you get there, then the rest of it is metadata and setup and configuration.
Yeah, and I was reading around on your site how that solves a bunch of sequencing problems that other plugin formats have. So
yeah, exactly. And so like VST2 didn't have sample accurate anything. VST3 does have sample accuracy, but it gives you a different queue for each parameter and so on and so forth, which I understand why they did it, but it turns out to be pretty clumsy to program too, right? And so.
Yep. Hey, so Vin, I was thinking for the one listener that's left now that we've gotten technical, it might be fun to talk a bit about some of the other projects that the team has going on.
Well, before we go there, and just in case, so whoever's not taken the nap, right? Porting, right? Because I was one of the porting to Windows on ARM. Now, this is one of the conversations I was having with Paul in my pre-chat, and I was discussing that both you and I are very heavily involved with the Windows on ARM R&D and testing at the moment. And the hardest thing for me at the moment, I mean, I've got all of my native DAW hosts, right? So I've got 4 or 5 running natively, but none of the plugins I've got are actually running natively on Windows on ARM. And Paul was...
By the way, so Surge's Nightly would if you downloaded it, but I think we may not put that in our release. I think we're just going to keep it in our nightlies.
Right. Now, one of the things that you were detailing for me was the challenges because of the different modes of porting over to... Now, again, I'm going to hand it over to you code heads, right?
So look, challenges is strong. So
I hate using the word.
Right. So I think the very clever thing that our friends at Microsoft did with ARM is make it so an x86 process running under the emulator can actually load a piece of ARM native code and run it. Right. That's super powerful. But in order to do that, they had to do a couple of technical things that involve using words like register that I'm not going to talk about. And so that type of ARM code that an x86 program can load is different than the type of ARM code that a ARM-only piece of software can load, right? So you kind of get Windows having 2 types of ARM. There's one called ARM64EC, which I think stands for Extended Compatibility. Why am I doing this instead of you, by the way?
Yeah. Emulation compatible. Right?
Emulation compatible, right? And then ARM64.
Which is classic.
And it's all great and it's all super clever, except when you look at the matrix of who can load what, there's this thing that an ARM classic program cannot load an ARM64 EC DLL. Right. And so you kind of got to make a choice which flavor you are. And that basically means you need to compile each of your plugins twice.
Okay. So now before we go on, right?
So let me just clarify just a little bit on that, Ven.
Thank you, Pete.
Right. So the differences are, just in case developers are looking, the code is the same once you get inside the functions, but the stack layout is different for ARM64 EC because it's compatible with x64 stack layout. And that also includes a reduction in the number of registers, which is something that you were talking about. But then once you're inside the function, it's straight up ARM64 native code. But that stack layout difference, that ABI difference, is what makes it so that you can, ARM64 can load ARM64, ARM64 EC can load EC or x64, and ARM64 EC. Did I already do that one? Yeah. Anyway, I wrote a blog post about it before. If anybody's curious, it shows exactly what happens. And then we have a third one that goes on top of that, which is ARM64X, which is a single binary that has both ARM64 Classic and ARM64 EC in it. And then we load the right thing based upon which, the architecture of the process that's calling it. And that's what we've instructed a lot of plugin and ASIO driver and other folks to use.
Right. That's kind of a lot like the old plugins that used to have 2 internals, one for AVX and one for SSL4 and one for SSL2. Yeah. Same sort of trick.
Right. Yep. So the native DAWs that have ported across, are they all using the same?
Nope. It's a mix.
So, and isn't that going to be a problem?
So that's why we tell folks to use ARM64X for their plugins, so that you can have a single DLL out on the system, or a single VST3 in this case out on the system, that has a single entry point, and then it doesn't matter what the architecture of the calling process is.
Right. So if they code the plugin in ARM64X, it's going to work in all of the DAW, no matter what they're coded in?
Assemble rather than code is a better word. It's basically you compile it twice and then glue it together.
Yeah, you compile it twice and then the linker is what's doing the ARM64X generation.
Right.
So,
yeah. Okay, so that was my my question, because, what is it going to take to start getting some of these more major plugin developers to port natively?
So let me share some of the experience we had porting to ARM, which was great. And Pete's blogs were super. Porting to ARM 64 and 64 EC on Windows took me a couple of days.
Right.
A couple of days where I had to touch every single piece of our code base with a macro for a reason that I can talk about briefly, which is we got to ARM by using SIMD everywhere, and we use native aliases. And then on ARM64, the native aliases actually become the indirectional error, not the ARM replacement. And so you get a link error. So we needed to turn that off. But that's, if you're using SIMD to get to ARM, then you need to do a little something different. And, we went through that path. And so that was basically a Perl script I had to apply to our entire code base. But once I'd done that, it was up and running, and I bought, a $150 ARM Windows laptop off of eBay that someone regretted buying because it didn't run any of the software they wanted when they bought it in 2023 or whatever. Right. And got it up and running, and it worked. And then started looking at which of our dependencies I had to turn off. And that's still what's getting us a little with Surge. Yeah. One of our biggest dependencies is not supporting ARM64 EC. And so we think we're going to leave it in the nightlies, not in a numbered release for a little bit, unless we can figure that out. Maybe Pete and I can talk about that offline as well.
Yeah.
Because it's a pretty big dependency. But things like, we have a sampler project we're working on, and the FLAC library didn't compile on ARM64 Windows because it confused Windows with x86 in a couple of places. I haven't checked if that's been fixed yet, but I'm assuming that the FLAC team will fix that one day and so on. But the dependency pull is there. The other thing is our demand for it hasn't been all that high. One of the few support requests we got about our ARM64 nightly build of Surge is, why doesn't it work on my x86 machine, right? And so, I think it's still a bit early, which is good because it means we have plenty of time to get this sorted out.
Yeah, it's chicken and the egg problem for audio, Yeah.
All right. So look, and I think compelling hardware that runs compelling software is what makes people buy computers. Yep. And so that's, when the M1 Max came out, it was an amazing difference from my Intel-based MacBooks, right?
Yeah.
The only jump I've seen in sort of level of computing in front of me was in the 90s when I went from a Sonos workstation to an SGI Indigo, right?
Right.
And I don't remember those old SGI machines, but
that was a gorgeous machine, by the way. Absolutely
beautiful machine, right? And that jump was like, I can actually fundamentally do something different on this desktop, right? And so those are pretty rare. When Windows has that moment with, I'm just getting close. I hear these new Surface laptops are amazing. I don't have one, but I hear they're pretty incredible, right? And then people will get them, and then the drivers will be there, and you'll get there over time. I think, Mac OS has more of a forcing function with its software than Windows does. We can argue about whether that's good or bad. For some things it's good, for some things it's bad. And so I think it'll be a little slower on Windows. Some days in moments of frustration, I wonder whether, manned mission to Mars or everything's ported to ARM on Windows is going to happen first. But, look, I think this is going to be another 2-year thing, Vin.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. Or 3.
It's true, since, we didn't just tell everybody, piss off, we're moving to ARM, everything here coming up. Like, folks are like, well, let's wait and see. Right.
Yeah.
And then the EC stuff you talked about is a legitimate, it's a great way to deal with the problems that we have with a mixed architecture community, but it does add another step. And the fact that maybe folks don't realize, but things like EC and the X parts, they require that you use our linker for that. And that doesn't fit everybody's compilation process or, their setup. So we have to work them through.
And also the CMake workflow is like, it's
the CMake workflow is tough.
Yeah. Right. And, so look, we compile Surge for, 50 platforms, and X is the first one that's made us change the way we think about how our continuous integration works.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so But honestly, I was telling someone today that, if Luajit worked, I would just bite the bullet and complain vociferously and send you a nasty gram on Discord about how awful it was that I got it working, right? But it'd get it working because, it's just run shit and glue shit together. It's not rocket science. But, along with the lack of our dependencies, it's kind of making us press pause a little bit, although that'll change, right?
Plus, we didn't have the ARM64 runners and stuff on GitHub until about a year ago.
Yeah.
And so that kept a lot of those projects aside.
Yeah.
And there are other things like, Vin, FL Studio has come up here a couple of times. Delphi, which is
he still programming in Delphi?
Yeah, it's all Pascal.
Wow.
Okay. Embarcadero now has that. Like, we're working with them because we need ARM64 targets to be able to port something like FL Studio, which runs fantastic under emulation, but we'd really like to have a native version of that as well.
Yeah,
right.
You know what else is written in Delphi?
MT-ESP Studio.
Yes, Multitrack Studio.
Yeah, Multitrack Studio.
It's stunning to me that the only two Delphi applications I've run across since I wrote my own back in like the early 90s are both in this space.
Yeah, and look, we have Delphi bindings for clap. People are writing claps in Delphi and Zig and Rust and a bunch of other languages, right?
There you go.
And the new MIDI API, I made a number of concessions there to make sure it worked really well in Delphi as well.
Yeah. So look, the thing about these things, Vin, is each one of these languages you get, though, adds a tool chain. So like, CLang 20 is going to support ARM64 EC, but until then, you're not going to be able to ... right? So, each time you add one of these architectures or architectural changes, you have an entire developer tool chain that is a prerequisite of getting the first version of the software. There's a prerequisite of getting enough critical mass. This is, you got to think about this as a year's thing, not a week's thing.
And like Pete was saying, and I know we've mentioned it before, that it's the chicken and egg. But the point I was wanting to make was that people listening in are probably thinking, well, Vin and Pete are sitting in front of these, these Snapdragon X Windows laptops. What are they actually doing with them? Well, I've got 5 major DAWs running on, and I've got I've ported over my test sessions using non-native plugins, and I can belt this laptop to the point of nth degree where, I said to Pete, I've got the fans running flat out. He goes, I don't believe you, because he's never heard the fans kick in on his. But then I'm showing him screenshots where the whole thing is like, we're talking, it's reading at 98%. All of the cores are absolutely blocked out.
Because you're running a lot of stuff on there.
I'm running, well, there's saturation tests, right? The empirical saturation test. But the point I'm making is that these are all with non-native plugins and virtual instruments. I've got Contact running to the point, and it's stable as, Paul. It's not, this thing's not falling over in a heap. It is stable as. I've got some good native ASIO drivers from multiple audio interface developers. And if I handed this laptop with the plugins and the virtual instruments that I've managed to get working on the laptop itself, on the environment, people wouldn't know. If I didn't tell them they weren't native, they wouldn't know, because unless you're getting into that nth degree of where you're really pushing these sessions to the point of collapsing the engine, it just runs beautifully, So it's not that they don't work. It's just, it would be really nice. I want to see what the percentage variable is between the emulated plugin and
but Plogue just released, like the Chip Synth team released all their stuff as ARM recently, right? Didn't they just do that? I thought because David there was the one who helped me pick the abandoned laptop that I could port on. Who was
that? Sorry, Paul, I missed that.
David Vien's at Plogue. They did the best DX7 I've ever used in my life.
Right.
And I always loved their Commodore 64 based stuff.
Yeah, and the Chip Synth they just released is amazing. But they're I'm going to plug someone else's. If Dexit is great, and I have commits on it, and Pascal's lovely hangs out on our Discord, and it's great in a mix. And I think it's a wonderful piece of software. But that Plogue DX7 is just a work of attention to detail that is breathtaking.
Nice.
And it costs just like $25 or $50 or something like that. You should just immediately end this podcast and go buy it if you don't have it. Yeah. It'll make you happy.
But Vin, the performance delta stuff you're talking about is like, you're going to see, yes, there'll be some performance difference. Honestly, the emulator is really good. What you're going to see more is battery difference.
Like the ARM64 native code, and whether it's EC or not, is much, much lighter on the battery than emulated x64 code. 'Cause you think like an emulator is running all the time, whereas your regular code has natural points where stuff's going to swap out and you're going to have other things going on.
It's not even a point of discussion, Pete, because I've actually accidentally knocked out the power supply out of the laptop, and I was running all of these benchmarks where the thing was literally at the point of melting, and I didn't even realize, right? You can't do that on an x86 laptop. The thing would be sitting there, one would be clocking itself down, and it would be just literally shitting itself in a heap, right? So now I've got a question for both of you guys.
Okay. Good, because we're only at hour 2, so we should get started with the question.
Yeah, great.
This is only half the time that we normally take, and we worked in Dunkin' Donuts and Maryland and a bunch of other stuff.
The question that I had, and this is the challenge that I hate using that word, but I mean the thing that I've been navigating in getting the non-native plugins and virtual instruments installed on Windows on ARM, and I've had this discussion with Pete, is that some of the installers just don't work. They just shit themselves, right?
Yeah, it's that Inno setup stuff.
The Inno setup installer that says you're for x86, not x66 compatible.
Yeah, it just loses its mind. But here's the fun part, though, Paul. I can actually take the DLL from my normal Windows x86 install and just drop it into the VST3 folder, and guess what?
Yeah.
It works. So it's not that the plugin won't work. It's just that the installer doesn't want to put it where it wants.
I could send you the GitHub commit where we fix that in the Surge installer.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful.
Yeah, because there's an architecture table in Inno setup, and if you don't have ARM64 in there, it defaults back to x86 when it doesn't recognize it.
And if you just instead change it to x86 compatible, then you're okay, because then it will install on an ARM machine that has an emulator available.
Right.
So I talked to our emulation team. I'm like, can't we just put something in? Because in an operating system like Windows, you have so many special cases for things that are implemented kind of incorrectly or didn't keep up with the times or whatever. And I asked, like, can't we just have something here that will fool these installers into thinking they're on an x64 system? And unfortunately, I have to submit them case by case. So not every installer, but every product installer. And then they have individual workarounds. So, if this is the executable, then, tell it that we're x64 and then go on. And for plugins, I don't scale that way. I can't submit one for every possible plugin.
I know you've asked me to send you a list of the ones that I had to actually manually send across. And Pete, it could be endless, because that's just the plugins that I've been using within my test environment.
We should just get the Inno setup guys to write a little blog on how to make sure your x86 installer works on an ARM box. I think that's probably the solution.
Yeah, the problem is all the products that are like
17 years old, and
this is easy to solve for anything coming out after today. This is super difficult to install for all the older stuff.
Yeah,
but like exactly what Vin's saying, that they work, they're just not installing properly over there. Yeah, so I mean, there are challenges to all this, and I know we all hate that word, but there really are. And I don't want to downplay what Paul said either. Like, getting all your dependencies lined up for a new architecture, especially if there's a special case architecture that is a Windows only thing like ARM64 EC, is also a lot of work for these companies. So, and individuals and open source projects and everything else.
Yeah. Well, look, with Apple, they didn't really have a choice, did they? Apple said to them, "Hey, this is where we're going. You have to do it."
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that's because Apple has a degree of Apple has chosen to operate itself with a degree of control over its deployment environment that is different than Microsoft has. And I'm not saying one is good and one is bad. And as a result, you can run 23-year-old industrial presses with Windows, and that you can't do that with Mac OS. And as a result, Mac OS can change the platform to ARM and basically have it work in a couple of years, right? And there are different choices in how you think about your system and your system architecture and your software stack and how you deprecate things. And they end up with different experiences for the developers and different cadences for the end user. So Windows has chosen, I think, the commercially appropriate and responsible path of having lots and lots of compatibility. The TPM Windows 11 thing, whatever that people are now going to scream about me in the comments about. We'll leave that aside. Especially since I was just talking about it today on Discord with someone. But the idea that you have the same control over the operating environment in Windows that Apple does, I think is just wrong. It's the wrong mental model, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it is definitely, hard to move the entire ecosystem over. But I should mention also, just in case folks get the wrong impression, like audio industry stuff is special case. There are very few other industries, like video being one of them, and maybe some 3D rendering type stuff that have the level of requirements that audio has. So if you're somebody who's doing kind of mainstream computer stuff, like my daughter has an ARM64 PC that she uses at school. She has no idea actually what ARM64 is or anything about it, but all her stuff just works. But when we're talking about like vector instruction sets and being able to, shave a microsecond or 3 off of a particular programming task so that we can get everything into an audio buffer in time, like these are very specific scenarios that we have to deal with. And so it takes longer.
Yeah.
And also look, plugins are, plugins happen in audio and video, and plugins happen in Excel, right? But plugins don't happen in a college kid's laptop, right?
Yep.
And so if you're surfing the web and using Slack and Discord and watching videos on YouTube and running PowerPoint and Excel or Google Docs, you won't even, none of this matters at all. That's absolutely right.
No, they wouldn't even know. And I mean, audio is kind of probably more specific as well, because it's real time and it's ultra low latency. And I don't think, not even the video editing guys have
No, we are super unique this way. I've had to educate a lot of people internally on why a millisecond matters.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
But and as a side on the Excel, Word, Excel, all those, so those are EC apps for those reasons, because they have a long legacy of plugins that they need to be able to load.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Excel plugins is I shared with someone that they exist, and they were surprised, but they do exist and are very useful.
I had to spend a stupid amount of time in Excel like 2 weeks ago, and I just felt like I needed to shower afterwards.
So hold on a second. Excel is the most successful programming environment Microsoft has ever released.
Yeah,
absolutely. But having to spend a week messing around with things in it and remembering that I forgot all these formulas from 20 years ago, which are the same formulas and still work. It wasn't the best feeling. It's like learning a new programming language.
Yeah, except it's also Excel.
Except it's Excel, yes.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sorry, the Excel team's got to send me some hate mail, and it'll be completely deserved on my part.
When they send you hate mail, remind them they said it was the most successful programming environment Microsoft has ever made. So thank you, Excel team.
Yeah, you blew a bit of smoke. That's okay,
I'm not joking.
No, it is actually good.
Yeah.
I can't use a PC without like Office stuff on it, but that's completely separate.
Yeah. And look, and we should mention that some of the larger video and graphics editing applications have come across native to Windows on ARM as well. Some of the Adobe stuff's come across. I don't think all of it has, but some of it definitely has.
Yeah, a bunch of Adobe stuff, a bunch of Blackmagic stuff. Yeah,
the Blackmagic has, Infinity. What are they called?
Oh yeah, the Infinity Designer and Photo and a bunch of other stuff.
The non-Adobe suite. That we'll call it the non-Adobe suite.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised Studio One went ARM, not ARM EC. That surprised me a bit.
Yeah, so Bitwig did the same thing, and it's because all those thunking calls that get made, like when you cross in and out of the EC area.
Yeah.
Because we emulate on a function by function basis. It doesn't have to be a DLL.
Yeah.
Claes had done some performance measurement on that, and he was like, we're not going to do that. So and then I think Matthias.
Although I thought once C-Lang had EC support, they were going to have, at least for their separate process thing, an EC version of the engine, so they could load EC if it's EC only.
It's more like that once you're actually inside the DLL, there's some slight overhead to the thunking calls.
Gotcha.
Like when you're calling a function from an EC host into an EC implementation, like there's just a little bit of checking code there at the API.
Gotcha.
And so that felt wrong to some folks. And it's an option for people. They don't have to use it. And so the other option, which has its own other set of benefits that's really good, is you host your plugins in a separate process, and then you use cross-process communication to talk with them.
Right. So I thought that's what Bitwig was going to do for EC, right? They were going to have a version of their engine that would have ARM exactly. And by the way, that's how all the DAWs should work now. What the hell are they doing even loading this stuff in process? That's just lunacy. I don't understand that.
Yeah, and so we originally told the Steinberg folks, EC is probably the way you want to go because they load stuff in process. But if you're doing process isolation, then you've already got the solution. So
yeah. Anyway, there's my one hot take at hour 2.
Yeah. I think it's legit.
There you go. Now I think we were going to move to some of the other projects, and then we got completely sidetracked for 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, let me give a plug for a couple of other projects we have going on. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So we have Surge. We have all the libraries around Surge. We have Surge in Rack. Those are some very popular things that we have. We have a couple of other projects where people have approached us to basically maintain and build them once they decided to no longer have them. So we have a synth called Monique and a sequencer called B-Step that we adopted from Thomas Arndt when he decided to no longer work on pursuing those, and he decided to open source them. We haven't done as much with those as I would have liked, but we have them running and downloadable.
Oh, B-Step.
B-Step,
the plugin step sequencer.
Yeah,
I had
exactly.
a version. It was fantastic.
It still is fantastic. But it's now open source as well and up on our GitHub.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's cool, right? And then recently so there's a software plugin called OBXD, which is a software emulation is too strong, but tribute to the OBX synth.
I haven't seen that one on the team page.
It's one of the things we have to do before 1.0.
Does it have a jump preset?
You might as well.
Because if it doesn't, then it's no good.
So one of the big arguments we had about this is, should Jump or Tom Sawyer be preset 0 when you load it?
No, but Tom Sawyer was more Moog, wasn't it?
No, that's
that
filter sweep is an Oberheim.
The filter sweep, but the synth line is actually Moog.
Oh yeah, but
that one is yes, correct.
At the beginning,
Yep.
That was a fantastic emulation right there. Yeah. Paul. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. That's Duncan quality.
I'm going to be sampling that one.
Yeah, exactly right. It's a ringtone on your luggage. So that was an open source project. And then the person who had the open source software licensed it to someone who took a closed source, but left the open source branch sort of sitting there. And so we've been rejuvenating the open source branch a little bit, which is kind of fun. And so that's turning into a nice project. And then the big one, which we've been talking about forever and a day, but we still haven't been able to finish because it's almost too big a project for the team the way we're working. But I think we'll get our heads out of our butts and get it finished. Is Short Circuit, which is the sampler that Claes had side by side with Surge. And he was very reluctant to open source that because the source was a mess and he hadn't worked on it in a long time. But after he saw what we were doing with Surge, he sent me the source. And with that one, unlike with Surge, where we kept a lot of the original source, we decided to sort of we took some of the DSP code, which was really interesting, but a lot of the infrastructure around it, we've basically been rewriting into a full-blown sampler that is actually, I shouldn't say sampler. I'm not going to say sampler. I'm going to say sample-initiated instrument, I think is a better way to describe it.
Sample player.
Well, so it's more like Falcon than Contact. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
More like Alchemy than SFizz, right?
Did you ever get across Alchemy, Pete?
Yeah, I did, shortly before it was purchased and killed.
Before it was snatched up and pulled from our hands. Yes,
but it's running in my DAW right now. What are you guys talking about?
Because Apple bought it and killed off all the Windows side of it. Paul.
Yes, I do know that.
Yeah.
He was just rubbing it in a little bit. It's all good.
From listening to you guys today, you sure you don't want to just buy Macs? It may make it better.
Piss off.
Sorry. Sorry. What was that? I think something just. I think you dropped out there for a second, Paul. What was that?
Yeah. I think so.
Hey, Pete. You know those. That 1989 little swear box thing that I've got. I think I've just found a spot where I'm actually going to just drop in one of those
Listen, if you can't play a sample of the filter sweep over here that we just heard a few minutes ago, I said not even really a filter sweep, but envelope sweep.
Yeah. Anyway, so look, Short Circuit actually we've did a lot of work on it, and it's really interesting to think about doing that. We have, the trying to be non-allocating on the audio thread when you're doing something as complicated as an unrestricted sampler is a really interesting problem. And we did a lot of work. We got a bit stalled on it a couple of months ago, sort of very frustratingly. We couldn't quite decide on how we wanted to get it to a 1.0 release, but I think we're going to figure that out. So those are some of the projects. And then again, like I said, we've taken a lot of our software and we've put it into libraries, and those libraries are getting used far and wide in various projects. And look, I have some projects I do outside of the Surge brand because I don't want to take them to the quality that I would want to take them to if I put them in the Surge brand. And so that allows me to do some more experimental things that become a lot of the ideas that then later we use. Right now I'm using them to work out some of the ideas we have for the second version of Surge XT around some things like our voice manager and arbitrary filter routing and a new filter API and stuff like that. And so we've been doing a bunch of work. And look, the other thing I'd say about it is if you're listening, you say, wow, that sounds really fun. I wish I could work on a team developing audio software and give it away and not get paid. Then, you should join our Discord because we really are an open contribution project and really do welcome developers who want to hang and play by a pretty minimal set of rules. Those rules are basically no politics, don't be an asshole, and every piece of code gets reviewed when you're new, right?
Yeah.
But if you're happy to play by those rules, show up.
Yeah. And so that's interesting that Short Circuit was actually one of Claes's original projects as well. I wasn't aware of that.
It was widely beloved. And I think it was widely beloved because you could grab a sample, pull it in, add some shit to it, and press a key, and it came out the speakers.
But it was never a commercial product, though, was it?
No, it was a commercial product. It was a commercial project. Yeah.
Short Circuit.
Yeah, Short Circuit.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that ease of workflow is the thing that makes it really popular. And I think one of the things that we've made difficult is, we sort of, is this a sample player? Is this Falcon or is this Contact? That sort of tension has made it a difficult project to scope properly. But we have a design for it we like. And frankly, the version of it we have as a late alpha now actually is pretty useful synthesizer and sampler. People are already making music with it, even though we're basically streaming stable now as well. So I think they'll be safe.
Yeah.
When you say sample initiated, you're not talking like D50 type of micro, like a TAC transient sample.
No. So basically the amount of DSP you can put between that sample and the speakers is enormous, right? Including doing useful things with empty zones because we have VA overlays and filters and effects and large amounts of modulation capability, right? So it's not designed to be a library sampler like, you load a great big SFZ and play it perfectly. It's much more, it's kind of like what Serum did with samples in Serum 2, right? Or really kind of like what, some of these, much more creative samplers like the TX, the TZ, I can't remember its name now. I can't remember its name of Patrick's plugin. But it's kind of like, well, I don't know, just download it and play with it, right? Drag in a sample and then stick some crap on it and get some sounds, right? And so, I think that's kind of the idea. It's a fun piece of software. Yeah.
Finn, that sounds like a good subtitle for the podcast. Just stick some crap on it and put out some sounds.
Put out some stuff. I thought it's fun working on stuff that works was probably a good subtitle.
Yeah, it's fun working on stuff that works. I said that in that Juice interview, and I liked that. I think,
I've quoted that.
I apologize for all the trials and tribulations on the MIDI project then.
Yeah.
Look, the step 1, give away synths, step 2, question mark, step 3, profit, right? As I said earlier, the nice thing about this project is we're not actually thinking of it that way. We're actually thinking about, hey, can we do something that is fun to develop and also, frankly, a bit of a gift to the audio community. Right? Yeah. There's plenty of people out there. I don't fool myself to think that Surge is better than Diva or that Surge is, better than whatever, any other big headline synth you can name, or the Short Circuit is better than Con. But I don't even think in that dimension, right? Better or worse is not the way to think about it.
Violins are better than violas.
Although more competitive if you're trying to get a seat. But the thing I do think is, hey, here's a group of people who've kind of come together and had fun and given a piece of software to folks that they can use to make pretty robust music for free on a whole bunch of platforms.
Yep.
And, for some people learn some synthesis, and for some other people make some really pretty amazing music.
Yeah.
You know, Surge's been using a lot of commercial projects at this point, and some of that stuff that people send us sounds really, really good.
Yeah. Well, it's not. Look, you got to remember what the genesis of this the instrument was. It was a commercial product for how long? 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It has good bones.
Yeah. So look, I think, and I've switched quite a few people on to Surge, since I stumbled on it, and even like this
You'll
week,
get your royalty check.
Exactly.
Yeah. The percentage of 000.
Exactly. If they don't like it, I'll send them a refund.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, there's a few people that I've turned on, and they've just gone, well, how did I miss this? I went, I don't know. How did I miss it? How did all of us miss it? It was staring at us for all this time, I suppose.
Yeah.
So look, one of the moments when I realized maybe it was, it was during COVID, admittedly, but I looked at like the 1.8 when we released Surge 1.8, which was a upgrade, I think, where we added a whole bunch of filter models. And, 6 months after that, I figured out how to look at the download stats on GitHub, and it'd been like downloaded a couple of 100,000 times.
Yeah.
And I was like,
nice.
Wow, that's like, I don't know, it's kind of a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And I assume that 3/4 of those people run the installer and then put it in their plugin collection and then never use it. But still, that's, a bunch of people actually making music with the thing.
Well, look, it's part of the collective. I've got a stack of commercial synthesizers here, and you've named some of them. And I'll just scroll through those, and I like them, but I spent more time in Surge than pretty much anything else after I downloaded it. So, I mean, that's for me saying it kept my attention for more than 2 or 3 presets,
and look, for my personal music now where I'm using keyboard-based instruments, Surge plus Piano Tech plus the Arturia Jupiter 8 plus that Plug DX7, and then the Valhalla delays and reverbs.
Love the Valhalla stuff.
That's like 90% of my starting point.
Yeah. So when you say Jupiter 8, is that physical or software?
No, the Arturia one. Sorry, Arturia Jup 8.
Okay.
The new one sounds really nice.
Right.
And sometimes you just want that. You want that sound.
And another shout out for the Valhalla plugins. I remember when those first went on sale, they were always $50 for the plugin, and there's not a single one of them that sounds bad.
They are. I mean, I use them on. I don't think I have a track where I haven't used them. They're amazing.
What's the hot sauce ad? I put that shit on everything.
Exactly. I mean, you have to be a little careful with shimmer, because if you put shimmer on everything, then it really does sound like does sound like shimmer on everything. But the vintage verb and the delay models are just great. Yeah.
And they're the plugins are tight and super efficient too. So
tight and super efficient, and the UI is great because it just does what it says on the tin. Yep.
Yeah, and it's small.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of nice stuff out there. I mean, we've had the guys from Cherry Audio on, Pete. That was that was a marathon show, Paul. If you've got 3 hours to kind of kick.
Yeah, it was good stuff.
We had an absolute ball on that show. But they do some amazing stuff, and it's very, very well priced. And it's they give stuff away occasionally.
I mean, look, what a miraculous world we live in. That you can go buy an $800 Macintosh or a $700 Windows laptop, and you can spend $60 on Reaper or $200 on Logic or whatever, and then you can download some free plugins and make music that sounds good. Right? Yeah. Like, that's cool. It's like the jetpacks of music, right? Like, thank you for it's great, right?
Exactly. Where is my jetpack? We don't have jetpacks, but check out this plugin.
Exactly, right? Because jetpacks kind of suck anyway. Like, imagine the accent on a jetpack. And so I really think that's cool and great, and I'm happy that I got to be part of the group of people who helped expand people's access to that experience.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. I am going to go to a question that I ask all of the guests on, and that is their thoughts on the current state of music technology and future development in that area.
Right. So touched on that, but first of all, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So So I'm in a band now. You can check us out at leewardband.com, LEEWARD band. We're playing around Brooklyn in November if you want to come hear us.
Oh yeah, I'll just fly over, man.
Yeah, the coffee's great. I thought there might be people other than the three of us listening, but probably not at this point. So but look, I'm in this band, and the band has no keyboards. The band is drums, guitar, bass, and singer. Right? We're writing music. It's really fun. It's a lovely experience. I'm really enjoying it. And because we're we don't want to be bad, so we record all our rehearsals. Great, fine. This is nothing revolutionary. So a couple of months ago, I bought. I don't normally buy Behringer equipment, but Behringer has this 8-input interface for $220, the 18i20 or something like that. And it's just 8 preamps that are okay, that sends you 8 channels over USB at 48K. And so now when we record our band, we have a drop from the PA, I DI the bass, I have a SM57 I put in front of the guitar, and then 3 mics on the drums. And I just record every rehearsal 6 or 7 track. Okay. You wonder where I'm going with this, right? Because why the hell am I talking about this recording my band? The next day I wake up and I just run the stem splitter on the drums and the vocals to get the bleed off. And then just quickly do a mix with, the Logic compressors and, a little bit of reverb here and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden our rehearsal recordings sound like as good as many rock records that recorded in 1974, right?
Yep.
And every time I do this, and then I just put them all in Dropbox, and then the rest of the band gets them on their iPhone in the middle of the day the next day, and we all listen to it on our headphones around the world. Well, not around the world, we're all around Brooklyn, but we all listen to it on our headphones wherever we are in our job at that point.
For very small values of world, yes.
Exactly. Well, but sometimes I'll send one to a friend who hasn't heard the band in a while, right? Yep. And every time I do that, I think, hey, it's the future.
Yeah.
This is cool. This was a couple of $100 and a bit of expertise. And look, okay, fine. So I know how to do a parallel compressor on vocals so they don't sound bad and blah, blah, right? There's some expertise involved in it, but not much. Yeah. It takes me an hour or two, right? That is fantastic, right? And it's like when the first Bon Iver album came out, you found out that he recorded it because he, broke up with his girlfriend and went to a cabin in Minnesota and then just recorded the whole thing on his laptop. And it's a beautiful piece of music that emerged, right? So the state of music technology it's now at a point where people can be expressive and communicative about music, a degree of technical degree that is never before experienced. Right. And so folks will do things with that's just cool. And I mentioned the auto-tune, the first James Blake record earlier, right? Which just used auto-tune in all sorts of crazy ways. And I love that record, right? And you think to yourself, okay, cool. What's the random 21-year-old who first experiences a plugin that does XYZ do when they grew up using GarageBand when they were 13 because it was free on the Mac they had, or FL Studio because it was on it, right? And so that, I think, amount of music technology will continue to allow many more people to participate in that expression. I think that's really cool.
Yep.
It's everybody can be Tom Scholz.
Right. So, it's like, I know it sounds silly to say one of my favorite movies is Ratatouille, but I love Ratatouille. That's a great movie, right? Yeah. And everybody can cook. Doesn't mean that everyone's a world-class chef. It means everyone gets to have the experience of being, of doing that, right? And so all this technology that we've put in place, look, I am sure there are professionals who use Surge to make amazing material. And I'm sure there are professionals who use Surge to make toilet paper commercials, right?
Totally going to seek those out.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's mostly Valhalla Shimmer on those. But there's some kid in the basement somewhere who gets this thing and it's free and they didn't have to pay. The first time I touched a synthesizer, it was in middle school. My middle school happened to have a Juno, right? And I thought this was cool as hell, but I couldn't afford one. I couldn't do anything with it other than play it in middle school. Now it's all available to you. I think that's super cool. I think the other things that are happening in music technology, look, AI is coming for everything. I think AI will be if you make your living writing toilet paper commercial music, maybe that's going to be a harder way to make your living. So I think the economics of the music business continue to shift, right? We already had a lot of that with, CD sales moving to streaming and, the economics of being a working band are really pretty tough right now. So I don't see that changing. But look, John Cage was a plumber. right? The guy from the dismemberment plan worked at IT at the Washington Post, right? These things are all true facts, right? People, that doesn't stop people from making the music. So, I don't want to be dismissive of the risk of AI for a lot of commercial music, but with it, I'm enthusiastic that just like weird uses of auto-tune and weird uses of old radio equipment that became synthesizers, we'll get someone doing something pretty amazing with that technology as well.
Yeah.
Although we'll get a lot of dross, but we already got a lot of, we got a lot of dross with guitars as well. And I think, AI will also be very useful development, right? I turned on Sonnet 4.5 in C Lion when it shipped a couple of weeks ago, and it's very, very, very good computer programmer. It really is. It's not just reading Stack Overflow. It's actually doing things that look an awful lot like reasoning to me about software, right? It's really impressive. And so I think that'll change the curve of how we develop software pretty substantially. I think that could be useful in the music industry, perhaps, but I think it's larger social and economic impacts on the software development industry. I think we still don't quite understand yet.
Yeah. Plus, we're going to list you as vibe coder now in the in the credits for the show.
Look, the first time I programmed a piece of software, I used Turbo Pascal on an 8-inch floppy, right? The tools have always got better every day, and it's made me a better coder every day, right?
Yep.
I review the code the AI writes before I commit it.
Yes.
But also, why be derisive of vibe coders? Someone has an idea and they have a tool that lets them do it. That's cool. Awesome. Right? I like that. I know there's lots of questions about IP ownership that are real questions, and there's questions about the energy impact of that. Those are real questions as well.
Yeah.
But let me stay optimistic. And then the last thing I think about music technology is the manufacturing pipeline. You go to Guitar Center, and there's a bunch of amazing guitars for $300 that if you set them up, because Guitar Center doesn't set up their guitars very well, are fun to play and sound good.
Yep.
Right? Like all these things are cool if your job with music access is to give music technology is to give people access to that sort of fundamental human experience of creating and sharing a piece of music.
Yeah, and that I think that's the point with that we've discussed with AI, Paul, is that you've got the creative versus the generative, and that's the I suppose the gray area of, where does it cross over? And it's the generative stuff where, now with those song generation platforms that I'm not going to even name, but which ones I'm talking about, that, people are now using to create complete AI artists and then flooding streaming platforms with them, but they're not disclosing it, and then they're getting busted, and then there's all the shitstorm over how many AI artists are actually now flooding across these.
Yeah, right. And there's this AI actress that tried to get CAA representation a couple of weeks ago and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So look, these things are. I don't want to diminish any of these problems. That would be foolish. You can look at history. And the introduction of recorded music, the introduction of radio, the introduction of television, the introduction of the VHS. Each one of these has had pretty positive and negative both impacts. Yep. I think AI is a bigger piece of technology than any of those.
Yes.
I think it's more like transistor and printing press than anything else. And so I don't have the answer. I'm just some guy who gives away a synth for free sitting here on a podcast bullshitting, right? I'm not going to give you the answer to how the world should treat AI. But the moments I have of hope around music technology, which is how I really want to answer the question, is that, there are a collection of tools that were given to people that let them have this wonderful experience. Yes. Remember the first time you and a friend played a song together on a guitar, right? Or a piano?
Yep.
Right? It's awesome. There's a variety of reasons I'm happy to be in a band, and we're a pretty good band. I'm happy with the music we're writing. We sound pretty good, and people like coming to hear us and stuff. But the primary goal was, once COVID was over, I just needed to stand in a room with people and play something. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so, that allowing more people to have that experience and allowing to do it in a way that interacts with technology and they can share it, is cool. And I love it when people show up on Surge Discord and say, I haven't done a lot of writing and haven't done sound design, but what do you think of this? And you hear something and you're like, hey, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Right? Maybe it's not my cup of tea. It's not, the next Aphex Twin record, but here's a person who's interacting with the community and sharing something they made with a piece of technology and proud of it and having that human experience.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And, the more that the software I write can be part of that experience for people, the happier I'll be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, it comes down to, we can use the robots, but we've got to remember that the whole thing with music is that it's the human interaction and the human element that is the more important aspect for me. And for a lot of people, and like what you've just described with your band, you needed to get back into a room with some humans, after we were all, virtualized for quite a while there. But then again, look at what we're actually doing here at the moment, right? We're in opposite ends of the world. We sound like we're in the same room.
Exactly.
And we're
with a very tiny clock.
Yeah. For folks, I have some kind of weird tick that was introduced in my audience today.
Well, I'm assuming it'll be edited out from the podcast, and then people will be what? So you just put the tick in for the next 1.5 seconds, so people on the stream can hear it.
Yeah, let's just have dead silence for a second.
Fuck! It does sound like a ticking clock. Pete, have you got what? Let's go.
Sorry, apparently this place is going to self-destruct here in a few minutes.
I was thinking it's that Poe story where we're all being driven mad by the clock and the floorboards. Sorry, where was I? Yeah, so right. So, exactly. Like, let's take a look at this. We're all sitting here talking about music, and we're going to record it. And then, I'm going to press stop here, and I'm going to render a WAV file and send it over to you. And Pete will do the same. And then you'll edit it together, and you'll put it on the internet. And 13 people around the world will get to hear this sentence because they listen to the podcast for this long, right? It's like,
and they'll think that we're actually within, 10 feet of each other, talking shit.
Yeah, exactly. But Pete and I are at Dunkin', and you're at a place with the world's best coffee, no doubts, no questions.
Right. Exactly.
Dunkin' Donuts. I don't even know if we've got Dunkin' Donuts in Australia. We may have. I'm going to have to.
I'm sure you don't, because your coffee is beyond reproach.
Exactly. Your donuts are shit, though, Vin.
No. We have got some good local donuts, and we're not going to put what's that other.
We don't want to hear about the Australian. Do they come with kangaroo in them? Come on, like
this kangaroo meat. Got to eat it under the drop bears.
Do you throw them on the Barbie with the shrimp? Like,
Paul,
I don't think we need
to. Paul, we don't call it shrimp here, mate. It's a prawn. Get it right.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Fucking shrimp on
so
a
the whole
Barbie.
shrimp on a Barbie thing.
The whole shrimp on a Barbie thing is a fake then.
Wasn't that Paul Hogan? Wasn't that the old...
It was Paul Hogan on a tourism ad for your country in our country.
Well, he needs a good slap in the side of the head, all right? Or maybe a VB can thrown, very forcefully at his forehead.
Just get him to get up there and be like, that's not a shrimp.
That's not a fucking shrimp, mate. That's a prawn.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's me going to my alter ego, Paul.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Anyway, so look, there's my optimistic view on music technology, right?
Yeah.
So
awesome. Now, one last question, and you can actually veer off into anything else if you'd like to discuss anything after this. But the last question I'm going to call you is just the general community for Surge, the Surge team. You've spoken about it a fair bit already in Discourse. Is it the Discourse? Yeah, you've got a Discourse.
Discord. Yeah.
Discord.
Discord, not Discourse.
Yeah, they're two different things, aren't they? Yeah. Two different apps. Discord, is that the one that got hacked?
The answer is probably yes, because everything gets hacked.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So you want to just give us a bit of a general overview of the community?
Yeah, sure. So look, there's a couple of ways that the team communicates. We have Discord, which is basically it's a chat server. It's like Slack or IRC or any of these other things in perpetuity. But it's a pretty good one. I think it started in the gamer community, but now it's in broader communities than that. So we have a pretty active Discord where we chat.
Yep.
We use GitHub a lot. But, the mechanics of the community are that. But look, there's a group of people who spend real time on this thing. And, we have a couple of rules inside the community. Like I said, no politics, try not to be a jerk. If you're a jerk, apologize. Try to say thank you. Try and be, polite-ish, polite adjacent, right? That matter. But it really is an open community where people show up. And, we had one person who joined the community a couple of weeks ago and said, I've just discovered Surge and I'm using it for physical modeling. And some of the patches they've been posting are I'm like, I just can't believe that's Surge, right? That actually does sound like an acoustic drum kit. And an open sharing community. And we extend that to the software as well. Of course, we need to be a tiny bit more controlled about committing something to the main software branch than we do to, posting something on our Discord, right? And so, we do have a group of us who have merge rights on the properties, maybe 10 of us, 5 of us, 7 of us, something like that. And there's a couple of things where we keep the permissions a little bit tighter. Like I think only 2 or 3 of us can delete secrets from the GitHub repo or something like that. But I did a review. I did a review about 2.5 years ago to make sure there was nothing that only one person could do. Right.
Yep.
If I left the project, someone else would have to go and buy Apple signing certs. But other than that, everything else is multi-person. But and look, those mechanics things all matter a lot. But really, the idea is that we're just trying to make a synth, man. Like we're just trying to we're just trying to ship some software and have it be good.
Yeah.
And I often joke that one of my secret missions with the project was to see if you could actually have a relatively unmanaged collective of people who assembled around a shared purpose and did something that was useful. And I think we've actually done that as a group, which is nice.
Yeah.
And done it without any of us having to be too heavy-handed or really do things that feel too job adjacent, which is good.
Yeah.
And look, you do that as well with things like no deadlines, right? The Short Circuit has been going into beta for 1.5 years now and is still not in beta, and that's okay. None of us really mind.
Yeah.
We XT 1.4 will come out this year, but I think it'll be our longest time between numbered release. I think it'll be almost a year between releases, right? Because we were doing other stuff, and that other stuff worked out nicely. But the community works super well, and I mean it when I say anyone's willing to join, just show up and join the tuning channel if you're interested in microtuning, or hop in the sound design channel if you want to learn how to program a synth. There's plenty of people that are willing to teach you how it works as well. We get questions that range from I installed it and I don't know how to make it make sound up to, have you thought about key tracking comb filters in this way, right?
Yeah,
like the whole spectrum of things is there.
Yeah. And that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's cool. And, I'm glad to be part of it. It's a fun thing to do with my time.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other rule we have is there's no money involved, right? A lot of people often ask us, can we contribute something? Can we pay? And we've all chosen, those of us who are working on it quite a lot, have all chosen to not have a Patreon, not have donations for a variety of reasons, including that just sort of isn't the vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. No, of course.
And I honestly, if we had a Patreon, I think would generate, not an amount of money that I want to be rude and scoff at, but not enough money that would change any of our desires to work on it.
Yeah. Look, I can understand that completely. I mean, I've been running my DAWbench project since 2005 officially. It's even before that. I've never monetized it. And, I contribute a lot. Well, I contribute as much as I can to the community, but it's amazing to me sometimes the pushback that I get on what I'm actually sharing. And I'm like going, where's this coming from? It's like, it's free. It's actually helping the community. But then I get people that tend to think that, I've got a target on my forehead for some reason. I don't get it.
And look, we occasionally get, some negative. So like one of the negative dynamics that personally drives me crazy is someone opening a GitHub issue that rudely says, why doesn't Surge do X? I can't believe you haven't added it. That's easy.
Well, why don't you do it?
And so the lovely thing about being open source is I can say, oh, I'm glad you think it's easy. Here's how you submit a pull request. Right?
And I bet you hear crickets, right?
The number of people say, oh, I'm not a developer.
Well,
and I'm like, then how did you know it was easy? Like, so, there are failure modes like that, but I got to say that's twice a year, once a year, something like that gets me on the wrong side, and there's a lot of, look, open source communities have all sorts of breaks, especially, some of the Linux communities are really hostile and unwelcoming, and we've tried to avoid all those vibes. Some of the Windows audio communities are really like, KVR has some lovely communities, but it also has some other sub communities in it. We all know this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, we've just tried to make a corner of the internet that's not too much like that and that has a shared purpose around something fun and do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of worked.
But with the Discord can you do the layout into like a forum type of layout? You can't, can you?
We haven't done a forum. So look, some of us hang out on KVR. I hang out sometimes on like Linux musicians and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I'll be on often people will report if your listeners are still listening, and I have one request, which is if you report a bug to Surge, please report it on our Discord or GitHub. Don't you find out that someone put a bug report on the Reason forum 6 months ago and is still mad that it's not fixed, and I've never even looked at the Reason forum, whatever, things like that. But again, that's rare. And there's threads and stuff, but it's just kind of it's chats. Like it's transient. You don't have to read it all. We use GitHub as permanent memory. And so if someone reports something, like one of the things, if I'm looking at it on my phone on the subway or whatever, I'll say, oh, come someone please make sure that gets to GitHub, right? Because that's the permanent memory of the book of work. But Discord is kind of where we go and, talk about what we think we're going to do.
Yeah, it's very much like where Pete will be, reading and interacting and responding to qualms with some specific thing that's going on within the Windows environment. And the first thing you say to these people, Pete, is report it on.
Oh, yeah. Report on Feedback Hub usually, but yeah.
But look, Pete's not I also use Discord to complain about the ARM64X CMake patterns to Pete, right? It's useful for all sorts of things. Sorry, joking aside about those patterns, because, like I said, we could fix those.
No, they're a pain in the ass.
Well, they're a pain in the ass, but that's not actually, they're a pain in the ass, but they're doable that's not the reason that we were having ARM problems. But the people are on there and you can reach them, right? And so, I think it's the other thing I'd say about the audio community is the developer community has been pretty open to, look, as I said, I'm some dude who's one of the people who gives away a synth for free. And here I am on the podcast, 2 episodes after the guy who invented the drum machine.
Yeah.
Like that seems a little disproportionate, but that's because the community has been pretty welcoming to us shipping stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Well, I mean, look, for me, each guest is as valuable as the next, Paul, and I say that in all seriousness. And we've had some amazing music tech pioneers on, but I enjoyed speaking to developers with, within the smaller. The smaller and lesser known developers that are bringing great applications to the community. And for me, everyone is of equal importance on this podcast. And I think that the listeners, a lot of times just, they'll look at the podcast episode and go, who is that? And they'll have no idea who you are or who the person is. And they'll listen and they'll go, wow, I had absolutely no idea that person has accomplished that so much. And, we've had numerous people on board, and Pete knows, some of my favorites where they weren't exactly like a name that would immediately ring the bells. But as soon as you listen to the podcast, you go, I had no idea that actually achieved that much, So, yeah.
Well, look, I hope people enjoyed the comments today, and, go download Surge. It's free, right? Like, what do you got to lose?
No.
It's I guess I should give the URL, surgesynthesizer.github.io.
Yeah, I'll be putting that in the description. So look, unless you want to have a chat about anything else, Paul, and I mean, the floor is yours if you want to do kind of open it, any other discussion.
I think we got a lot of the things I was hoping to cover, right? The sort of, pride we have in what we've been able to build, the fact that it's a we, not an I, the, ability to use the platform to try things that are fun and ROI free, and then using that to, push around standards and libraries and ship some tools that make some music, right? That's kind of what the project's about.
Yeah.
And thankful that the community was open-minded and, has let it's like I hadn't shipped a plugin in 2018. I mean, I'd shipped lots of other software, but I hadn't shipped a plugin. And so, you can actually have an impact and, share the message that if any of this sounds fun to anyone who's listening out there, especially if you're a developer and you want to show up and do some stuff, then, show up and do some stuff.
Yeah.
You have stuff to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Or by the way, if you're an audio plugin developer who's thinking it's the end of life for one of your products and you want to open source it, I'm always glad to talk to you about that. Reach out to me directly.
Nice.
Yeah. Very nice. All right. Well, I think with that, we can start wrapping this up, guys.
Yeah, let's do that.
thank you very much to both of you for your time and energy. It's been great, I mean, my eyes were glazing over a little bit when it started going into the code level stuff, but I think we kept the flow, interesting enough for the listeners. And you'll be surprised, Paul, that the majority of our listeners get through the whole shows, which is kind of awesome, So again, thank you very much to both of you guys.
Well, thanks for inviting me and for supporting the Surge community by inviting us as well. And Pete, thanks for all your amazing work on Windows MIDI subsystem and music subsystems. I think everyone in the community values that immensely.
Oh, well, thanks, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, guys, with that, on to the next.